And we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is an Israel-Palestine call-in show. We're going to do some commentary. We're going to let people call in, and we're going to have some fun. Have some fun despite the inherently emotional and depressing issue we constantly talk about. We're going to make the most of it. Cool. So, first of all, for those joining on Discord, welcome, community. If anybody wants to hop on, just raise your hand. We'll bring you on. I will drop a link, or you can find a link in the description if you want to. If you're watching this on one of the platforms it streams to, you can join the Discord and hop on as well. So what's going on in Gaza? Well, first of all, there's been an increase of aid going in. It seems to have not been enough yet. There was a series of airdrops that Israel did throughout Gaza, which we then saw some pretty sad videos of people rioting and fighting over the limited aid that was dropped. It makes sense. If people are desperate enough, they will fight their neighbors so they could feed their family. And also some of the aid that was piling up that the UN was meant to distribute, from what I've understood, has been picked up. It is interesting to see the commentary around this. And, you know, what we're seeing here is just a clear example of misinformation from both sides, and almost a boy who cried wolf scenario. But it's true that a lot of the NGOs and human rights groups that have been dealing with Gaza have not been fully honest with the reporting, with how they've been framing things. Even a lot of how they've been framing things surrounding food insecurity in Gaza has been misleading. So this has given people a level of mistrust in them, and that was very quickly used as justification for not believing what is true when it comes to very real food insecurity in Gaza. Now, on the other side of things, we saw the pro-Israel camp very quickly go from there is no starvation to, well, there is starvation, but it's the UN's fault. Which, again, you know, when the UN was distributing aid, we did not have this level of food insecurity. It was Israel that decided to stop letting aid in for 2.5 months and then started letting it in an average of half a meal per person per day for the past nearly 2 months now. And also shooting people daily when they're waiting to get this food, right? Now, when it comes to the blaming the UN, is it possible that the UN could have done more? So there's one narrative is that all this food has been waiting and the UN refused to pick it up. The UN, and people can speculate saying the UN just wants a humanitarian crisis so they can blame Israel. What the UN is saying is they weren't getting the proper permits from Israel in order to pick it up and distribute it safely. I'm not sure. I don't really know, but I don't think that I could see the UN taking a principled stance and not wanting to cooperate with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But I don't think it's probably not as simple as them saying, we'll let Gazans starve because we don't want to participate. I imagine it wasn't made easy for them to pick up that aid and distribute it. Another interesting thing that happened today is Israel is threatening to annex part of Gaza, meaning take that territory as their own. Now, once it's annexed, it's very hard to give back. It's not like you can technically give it back, but it needs to go through a process in the Knesset. If it's annexed, it very well may be annexed for good. It seems like the demands are return the hostages or we will annex territory. I'm saying annex, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced annex. Anyways, tomato, tomato. I don't think this is going to get them to release the hostages. I almost feel like this should have been used as negotiating leverage when they were still in Doha negotiating. Not now. It could be used to work out a better terms to a ceasefire, but for them to just unconditionally release the hostages just so Israel won't annex territory, Seems unlikely. Seems unlikely. But I think what we also have is Netanyahu is trying to keep his coalition together, and it seems this is something that Smotrich would very much be pulling for. And it's possible this is what is needed to keep him happy and his coalition alive. As horribly as Netanyahu has run this war, you need to think how challenging of a situation it is for him. A, to win over his people again so they could trust him as their leader. He needs to keep a coalition together, which means keeping both Smotrich and the ultra-Orthodox parties together, happy, keeping them happy, and doing all this while not losing international support, which he didn't fully succeed on that last one, right? Because there is an ICC warrant for him, and Israel is more isolated now than they've been in recent memory. So it is probably an impossible task. I think the right thing to do is I failed to protect my people. I stepped down, and whoever's next can decide what's best for the country. But hey, that's what we're stuck with, Bibi. That's what we're stuck with. Ibn Safi saying Abdullah officially accused Israel of genocide. Who's Abdullah? I know B'Tselem finally did. B'Tselem came out saying that it's a genocide. Yale Makoba says hello. Yale Yakoba. Is that Nigerian? What's that last name? Anyways, good to see you here in chat. Does anybody on Discord want to hop on? No? Okay. We could keep going. Oh, Justin is saying Adallah, which is justice in Arabic, is an independent human rights organization and legal center. It was founded in November 1996 as a joint project of two leading Arab NGOs, the Galley Society and the Arab Association for Human Rights, HRA, and it became independent NGO in 1997. Interesting, and I'm kind of ashamed that I haven't even heard of them. Okay, cool. Well, that's another one. Yeah, okay, you're South African. David, you're asking my on Telegram. Yeah, just search my name, my full name. You should find me. Yeah, sure, you can message me there, no problem. Let's see what else there's to report on. By the way, I was at a very interesting protest this weekend. I haven't been to any protests since I've been back in Israel for 4 months now. But this one was in a Arab-Israeli town called Sakhnin, but they do overwhelmingly identify as Palestinian. So it's probably more correct to call them Palestinian citizen of Israel. It's an interesting identity, right? 20% of Israel's citizens are Arab/Palestinian, and they have a variety of different ways they describe their identity. And for them, their identity also shifts depending on who they're speaking to. So Jewish Israelis will consider this segment of the population as Israeli Arab. They view them as distinct from Palestinians, generally speaking. Most Israeli Arabs, though, do have some identification with Palestinian identity. Some will consider themselves Palestinian citizens of Israel. Some will not have any Israeli identification. And by identification, I'm not meaning like an ID card. They do have Israeli ID, but how they identify, like they don't feel Israeli, they feel Palestinian. And others will say, no, I'm just Israeli Arab. I'm not Palestinian at all. And a lot of this depends on the individual, but it also depends on the community. Some communities are way more pro-Israel, others are a little bit more pro-Palestine. But but they're also often not, the way they identify to fellow Jewish Israelis is often Aravi Israeli, Israeli Arab, because it's more comfortable to identify that way. But amongst each other, when they're traveling to other countries, they'll often say they're Palestinian. And the reason I know this is because I often ask them and get a sense of how they identify. Like I was talking to this guy in Nazareth. I'm like, "Are you Israeli or Palestinian?" He's like, "No, I'm Israeli." I'm like, "So you're not Palestinian?" He's like, "No, of course I'm Palestinian." It was kind of funny. Um, okay, David, I got the messages you sent me. Thanks. I'll review these later unless they're relevant for stream. Do you want me to review this here on stream? If you want me to read it out loud. So, anyways, I was in. Oh wait, one more since we're already talking about the identity. I was in. My taxi driver was Arab, and I said, "Do you identify as Israeli or Palestinian?" He said, "Neither." I said, "What do you mean neither?" So how do you identify? He says, "Just a Sunni Muslim." I said, "Interesting. And what would you like to see as a solution for the land of Israel and Palestine?" He said, "I just want to be able to turn on my car and drive to Saudi Arabia without any borders or any checkpoints. That's my goal." That was interesting. That's kind of like an Ottoman era solution, it seems. But I've never heard that before. So there's many different identities here in the Arab/Palestinian demographic. That you need to turn off that Discord notification. That is annoying. David, I got what you want me to look at this? Okay, I could review this, sure. Omar, you're saying you like the taxi driver's vision? Yeah. But I don't imagine you would want to be under Ottoman rule, so who would rule the land if that's the case? You want the Turks back? No, I imagine you'd want it to be Arab rule, right? But I don't know if you're going to get much buy-in from me and my people for such a solution, so. Yeah, David, I'm happy to look at this. So, okay, I don't even know if I could screenshot that. Whoops. Okay, cool. Documentation from one of the markets in Gaza Strip shows an abundance of goods, fresh fruits and vegetables, and plenty. Prices are exorbitant, of course, courtesy of Hamas and the merchants working with the murderous organization. There's no famine in the Gaza Strip. There are terrorist organizations collaborating with tribal clans, merchants, the UN, and international organizations that help promote the famine campaign while being responsible for profiting at the expense of Gazan population. Yeah, I mean, this is just somebody that it doesn't matter what Israel does. Israel could literally start putting Palestinians in gas chambers, and this person would somehow find a way to blame Hamas. It'd be like, "Oh, well, release the hostages and we'll stop gassing you." Like people like that. It's just there's absolutely no attempt at objectivity and to try to explain this situation for what it is. So let's break it down. First of all, as we already mentioned, Israel controls all the borders leading in and out of Gaza, every single one. So no matter how you look at it, they bear responsibility. How much responsibility is up for discussion and debate. But Israel decided to not let aid in for 2.5 months. And then since starting to let aid in, they've been able to let in an average of half a meal per person per day. So and this is already while Gaza was facing food insecurity prior to them shutting down the borders entirely. No matter how you look at it, no matter how you spin it, Israel bears major responsibility. Now, in terms of the Hamas's role in this, so we've heard for months now that they're stealing aid in order to monetize it. A few weeks ago, the UN came out with a report saying they weren't able to find any evidence of that. And just 2 days ago, an Israeli official said, "We don't really have evidence of them stealing and selling aid. What might be happening is that they are taxing merchants, right? Some kind of an extortion fee. So those who do have food, for example, anybody who still has produce in Gaza that they're able to monetize, currently monetizing at a very high price, they could essentially be taxing that and making money off of it. And you can make the case that because of their tax, the price will be higher. Okay, but that's just the drop in the bucket in terms of what's contributing to food insecurity. The reason why prices are extremely high is because it's scarce. There's not much of it. So when people show a market filled with food as proof that there's no famine, that's not proof that there's famine. Famine, and first of all, I don't think there's widespread famine. You have different levels of food insecurity. Level 5 is famine. I think most Gazans are level 3 and 4, and I think some have entered 5. We do know that people have begun to die daily from malnutrition, and it primarily affects very young, elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions. But if you have a marketplace that has some amount of food, and that food is only affordable to, let's say, the top 2-3%, showing that there's a market that the top few percent of Gazans can afford doesn't really speak at all to the level of food insecurity that exists to most Gazans. So that's just not, it's just not the right way to look at it. And if somebody has a different take on how Hamas is responsible for these prices, I'd be interested in hearing. You could say that they're responsible because they haven't surrendered. Sure, but I don't know. You can't say surrender or else I will continue to inflict unimaginable pain on the civilian population. That's just not a legitimate tactic. Let's see. Oh yeah, and we got news also. So this week, France agreed to accept Palestine, like the recognition of the state of Palestine. And it looks like just today, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer plans to recognize the state of Palestine in UN in September. So yeah, those are positive developments. It's interesting because people are saying, oh, but that just rewards terrorism. But I don't know if that's how you should look at it. Statehood is not it shouldn't be seen as a reward. It should be seen as a right. And if that's not a right you want to grant Palestinians, then grant them the right of equality. You can't grant them neither. So no, this isn't a reward for terrorism. It's just the right thing to do. And we're not granting Hamas statehood. No one's granting Hamas statehood. They're granting the Palestinian people statehood. And it is interesting, a lot of traditional two-staters who claim to be two-staters were very upset about this. Because why? You don't want the world to accept the Palestinian state. You support two states, but on your own time, on your own terms. You want to do it when Netanyahu decides it's the right time. Got Christians, David says, got Christian Zionist friends on Facebook that get their news from their Telegram and believe the famine is fake. Yeah, I mean, we don't have a good truth-telling system in society. We just don't. I don't blame people for having no idea what's happening. The amount of work you need to do to get to the bottom of things is pretty immense, unless you just find a few select people that you could trust quite blindly and see the reporting they're doing. But just to know if they're reporting accurately requires immense work. So this is one of the greatest challenges we face as a species, I would say, our inability to know what's true. Maybe AI will help solve that. Yala says, are the Israeli ministers advocating for the annexation of Gaza going to give Gazans citizenship? No, I don't think that's the plan. Now, the thing is, a case could be made if all the land from the river to the sea is annexed, annexed, or more of it is, the claim could be made that a civil rights movement is easier and more effective than a national rights movement, meaning Palestinians engaging in means of resistance, hopefully peaceful resistance, as a way to achieve equality under the law, might be a more straightforward path of them getting their own state. So you could see a case that annexation will ultimately just lead to one state for all people. Adam says, how does one call in? So you call in through Discord. I'm going to drop a link. You join the Discord, you'll see there's the stage. You click there, and then you raise your hand, and you will be on. So I'm going to drop a link, and then you can join. Dave Pendre says, are there cafes and restaurants operating in parts of Gaza, and is that proof against famine? So the answer is yes, there are cafes and restaurants operating, and no, that's not proof against famine, because, again, if very few people could afford this food, then people aren't eating, right? Famine doesn't mean there's zero food in an entire place. Food is not distributed equally. People's access to food and their ability to purchase food is nowhere near equal. It's dependent on your socioeconomics and your geographical location. So there's people in Gaza who I imagine are eating quite well. They probably don't have access to all the same produce they're used to having, but if they have money, they're able to afford food still. But if you don't have money, or if you're in a place in Gaza that has less distribution, then yeah, you're facing food insecurity. Mr. Quick Save says AI will definitely not help. I don't know. A good friend of mine is actually working on it as we speak. He's building AI for truth telling. Yeah, I mean, what we've seen so far is, so I'm going to give you two data points, one hopeful, one less hopeful. One is just anecdotal. It's what we see online. When some LLM will give a response that is contrary to what somebody already believes, then they'll just sum it up to the LLM making a mistake, using biased data to reach that conclusion. But on the other hand, some university, it might have been Yale or Harvard, did a study where they allowed conspiracy theorists to talk to an LLM about the conspiracies they believed in, and it actually had amazing results. I don't remember the exact number. I could try to pull up the study using an LLM. So it reduced their belief in conspiracy quite significantly. So that's a sign. Cool, I found it. The study recruited 2,190 U.S. participants, all of whom self-reported belief in specific conspiracy theories. These range from long-standing ones, JFK assassination, aliens, Illuminati, to recent ones, COVID, 2020 election fraud. Participants described their chosen conspiracy and the evidence they found convincing. They then engaged in 3 rounds of dialogue with AI, which generated tailored evidence-based counter-arguments addressing the evidence they themselves provided. Average conversation length, 8.4 minutes. A fact-check reviewer assessed a sample of AI responses, finding that 99.2% of the claims were true, 0.8% were potentially misleading, and none false. Okay, you could say there might be bias in that on its own, but let's read it. I think this is probably a pretty legit study. The intervention resulted in an average of 20% drop in belief in specific conspiracy theory they discussed. About 1 in 4 participants went from believing strongly to expressing uncertainty. The effect persisted at least 2 months with no significant decay, showing durable belief change. Participants also showed spillover effects, broader reduction in conspiratorial worldview, increased intentions to unfollow conspiracy content, and greater eagerness to engage other believers in counterspeech. These effects were seen across conspiracy types and demographic groups, including some whose conspiratorial beliefs were tightly tied to personal identity. Why it matters. Personalized evidence matters. Tailored factual responses drew from participants' own claim and were far more effective. Whatever. This is just ChatGPT's addition to it. But that's pretty promising, no? Georgie says, these studies always show amazing results initially, but when replicated, they often show nothing. P-hacking is done by like 10 to 25% of people doing social science studies. Interesting. Well, if you have some kind of a study you'd like for me to pull up regarding that, I'd be happy to. Pizza Slice, I'm bringing you on.
Hello?
What do y'all think of this little toy? I just found it. I guess it's my niece's. Anyways, yeah, what's up, Pizza?
Hey, I just had a couple of questions. I was watching like this the stream initially, and you were talking about how the NGOs were like they're not the most accurate when it comes to talking about the food security level in Gaza. So I was just wondering, like, are you specifically talking about the IPC levels?
So I think there's 3 claims in particular that I'm talking about. And if people are interested, I could come back and do a full review of how the NGOs have been misleading the past 2 years now. But one of them was a report put out by doctors that were serving in Gaza about the level of food insecurity. And based on their assessment, they were saying we would have 150,000 deaths currently as a result of malnutrition. And we just see that that's not the case at all. Another one was about the amount of food that is coming in on the trucks, the amount of food that is needed. There was a complete misreport on that. And the third one, I'm trying to recall what it was. For those, Avi
For the second one.
Yeah, what's that?
So for the second, like claim about the
Yeah, I'll try to find the third in the meantime. But yeah, I'm listening.
Like I just heard something about how like 500 trucks is like needed, or like 120. So I'm not sure like if that's the numbers that you were like you remember. Like I think from what I recall, like I heard some people talk about like I think like 300 or 500 trucks a day are needed to go in, but only like 120 are crossing the border.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure like how many trucks are enough. Is that what you're referencing?
Oh, no. I'm talking to a report that was like a year ago. There was a misreport about how much food is needed. Actually, it was recently, I'll tell you, there was recently a report done by the Sadat Begin Center, which is a mixed bag. There's some things here that they completely missed the mark and are just completely wrong about. But other things, they seem to have done a good job. And the reason I say seem is because the things that I know very well, I noticed that they didn't do a good job on. But the areas that I know less well, it seemed thorough and compelling. They call it Debunking the Genocide Allegations, a Re-Examination of Israel-Hamas War. Now, I'm not giving this report an endorsement because I found a lot of bad claims here. But the first one, Chapter 1, is actually about how the NGOs were misleading. Here, I'll open it up. Do I want to read this whole thing? Let's see. No, I'll read a little bit, okay? Claims of starvation prior to March 2nd, 2025 were based on erroneous data, circular citations, and a failure to critically review sources. Actually, I'll just leave it with that. I'll drop a link if anybody wants to read it, but those are essentially the claims, and this report does a good job explaining how they were misleading with the claims that they made. I just don't want to do the full review.
Yeah.
But again, that doesn't speak to whether there's people dying from malnutrition now. There are people dying from malnutrition now. It's just when you don't engage honestly, people lose trust, right? So no matter what side you're on, if you want to maintain credibility, you should always try to be as accurate as possible.
So the 80 deaths from starvation, is that recently? Like, is that all like within the past few weeks?
Yeah. That's in the past few weeks, which is a stark increase. They're not the first malnutrition deaths, but there has been a stark increase as of late. And from what I'm hearing, this increase of aid is not quite doing enough to mitigate the food insecurity. I mean, it's probably helping a little bit, but it's not gonna. People will still be dying from malnutrition, it seems.
Do you think if journalists were allowed into Gaza, that we will have a much better understanding of like the level of starvation? Or do you think that will not affect it by much?
I think that it's possible that it would give credibility to the starvation claims because people don't trust what the MOH is reporting. Although, it's not just the MOH. I think Doctors Without Borders is involved and World Health Organization is involved. Yeah, I mean, more people reporting on it, I think it would just add to the credibility, but there's no reason to deny at this point that people are dying from malnutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's happening.
And I just want to talk a little bit more about the military strategy because they have been like the Israeli military has been like blocking aid from going to Gaza, and they cite the main reason for why that is because Hamas is like stealing the aid and like selling it. I'm not sure like if you remember, but even like a few months back, like I talked to you about like how like not only did they provide no evidence to that, but I think that I think that isn't probably true because of the price fluctuation of food. That whenever they allow aid into Gaza, like the prices drop. Whenever like they restrict aid, prices increase. And like the World Food Program, I think like on their website, like they have.
Oh, Pizza, you cut out for a minute. Can you repeat that? Go back like 10 seconds.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, I was talking like how a few months back, like I was like I'm not sure if you remember, but I was talking to you about how I think it's very improbable that Hamas is stealing aid at a significant level and like monetizing it because like the World Food Program, like every single month they put out like a list of the prices of food, and you can see like how much it fluctuates. Like especially with whenever like Israel allows aid in, like when there's a ceasefire and like they restrict aid. So to me, that shows me that like they don't have a control over like the market supply. So like that was the biggest red flag for me personally. And you've seen like now like the association agreement between the Europeans and Israel. Like they like the Europeans, they said that they have found no claims or evidence. Can you hear me now? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Like So I'm just wondering, like, to me personally, like, and there are so many other organizations that have basically said there is no evidence for Israel's claims. So, and like they haven't provided any evidence themselves, even though like they have all the incentives in the world to do so. So I just don't understand exactly why they're like blocking aid. Do you think like they just want to starve people to death? Like I don't understand the military strategy behind it.
So yeah, first of all, what you said, I spoke about earlier in stream that right now, we now have Israeli officials are saying that we don't have evidence of Hamas stealing aid, right? So it's not just initially the UN said it, and now Israeli officials are saying it, and there hasn't been evidence of this aside from Israel saying so, right? That's been the only evidence, and it does go to show how widespread of a narrative that became simply because Israel said so. There's we have a serious problem in how we determine what's true. If it's as simple as a one party or another that has an incentive to mislead, if you're blindly believing them, you're awfully going to be led to wrong conclusions. Now, what would be the strategy for that? So we could speculate on different things. One is that by creating a severe humanitarian toll and immense suffering to the people of Gaza, it could put pressure on Hamas to surrender and also put pressure on civilians, the people of Gaza, to turn on Hamas, right? Because Gazans can't do anything to Israel. There's nothing they could do. If they want to end the suffering right now, the only thing they could do is somehow get Hamas to step down. So you could see a very logical case for Israel to make, be like, look, we don't want to conquer the rest of Gaza. It'll be way too costly for our own soldiers. We'll likely kill the hostages while doing so. That's why 2 years in, we're only controlling 60% of Gaza, and even that, it's not quite 60. That's even an exaggerated claim. But you could see Israel wanting to. You could see a case where Israel's strategy would be, let's inflict so much suffering on the people of Gaza so they turn on Hamas and increase the chance that Hamas steps down. Another is, if your plan really is to relocate Gazans, which Israeli officials, including Netanyahu, is explicitly talking about, the best way to get Gazans to leave is voluntarily. The best way to get them to do it voluntarily is to make Gaza unlivable and life unbearable. And starvation is just another way to do that. Third can be, and this isn't how the reporting is now going, not that they're stealing and selling aid, but that they're more so taxing merchants for selling the aid. But that to me seems like it's a drop in the bucket. If you could tax the aid in a meaningful way, that you're getting a significant amount of money, it's just the numbers there just don't make sense to me, unless somebody wants to give me an analysis of what that looks like. But I don't see how you could tax aid in such a way that would be substantially fund your operation. But even if it does, that's not what's leading to the price. What's leading to the price is scarcity of supply and a high demand. So it's possible that they're able to fund their operation to some extent through tax collection.
Wait, so
but that
when
doesn't.
you say tax collection,
Yeah.
when you say tax collection, are you referring to taxing the aid, right when it comes to the borders, or taxing people who are selling the aid?
No. So again, the aid's not meant to be sold, right? It's meant to be distributed. It's meant to be given out to people. But if there's some merchants that have access to food and they're able to sell it at extremely high prices, Hamas could be like, yeah, well, okay, you're going to give us a cut of that. But that's not enough.
Just to be very clear.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, they're taxing the people who are selling the aid, right?
No, that's not the claim I'm making. I'm speculating. You asked what could be their strategy. So I gave you the first two, that it increases the willingness to relocate. It increases the chance that Gazans turn on Hamas. Third is, if they really believe that Hamas is funding their operation, then they would want to stop that. But that third point doesn't make sense, because the more scarce food is, the more it could be taxed, or the higher the price, then the more it could be taxed. I just don't see that. That doesn't seem to make sense as a strategy to cut funding off of Hamas. You could make the case that they don't want Hamas to if Hamas themselves are hungry, then they might surrender. But they have stockpiles of food. They're going to eat. They're going to eat before their population. And I don't even think that's all too unique. I think generally soldiers will always have food because they're the ones fighting, So Hamas, you can't feed 2 million people while keeping that food out of the hands of 30,000 people. It's just impossible. And if Israel doesn't want Hamas to be monetizing aid one way or another, then they should just flood Gaza with so much aid that the price goes down to zero. Create such a large supply that it can't be monetized. So the third option I just don't buy. It seems implausible because it doesn't make much sense. And if that was Israel's real concern, then they should just flood as much aid into Gaza as possible. Yeah. You have thoughts or a follow-up?
Well, I don't think like that. I've never heard like Israel make that claim that they're just like relying on taxation. So like like based on that alone, like I just doubt like that's even a significant thing. Like if it was significant, like at least Israel would have said something about it. And also, like I'm not sure if you remember, but like early on in the conflict, like Israel released a dossier, like basically claiming that UNRWA was not a neutral organization, that they were essentially just a wing of Hamas. And this led actually to like so many countries like to just defund UNRWA. And like later on, like a few months afterwards, like a lot of countries started like saying like, hey, we just defunded UNRWA without even reading the report. We just took Israel, like their words at face value. And there is no evidence to like any of the claims that they're making. And then they funded UNRWA like afterwards. Like I think Canada, like if I recall correctly, was they even said that like they deeply regret just taking Israel's word at face value, and they immediately resumed funding to UNRWA. So like that does seem very reminiscent. Like I'm not sure like if you remember that, like, but this does seem very reminiscent, where Israel is making a claim about like just with no evidence, and the entire world just like believing them, and then like more speculation comes. And yeah, so like I don't understand why anyone would take like Israel at face value, especially since early on in the war they basically lied about UNRWA being a wing of Hamas. I'm not sure if you remember that though.
I mean, I know that UNRWA there's been claims about UNRWA I've been hearing it for at least a decade now. I've never actually looked into that so thoroughly, but my impression is that it's almost certainly over exaggerated, and it shouldn't be surprising that in an NGO or a human rights organization that needs to work under Hamas is going to be they're going to need to find a way to work with them. They can't work counter to them. So they're obviously they're going to have ties with each other, very clear ties. And sometimes could you have a situation where someone at UNRWA also is in Hamas? Potentially, right? People could you could literally be in Hamas and have a day job. Is that the same as UNRWA recruiting Hamas militant? Right? You see how it's framed? Because I think they found an example of a few members of Hamas who were also in UNRWA. Yeah, okay, they had a day job, but the way it was framed was, you see, UNRWA is employing Hamas as if it was this intentional thing, as if it was this cooperation with them. But if they're going to work in Gaza, they're going to need to be in some level of cooperation, which if you point to those levels of cooperation, it can very easily be painted as something malicious or just something wrong with how UNRWA is running. That said, I haven't looked into it. I do imagine there's probably many ways in which UNRWA could improve and be a better NGO. I'm not in a position to put out such an analysis.
Yeah, I think the original like Israeli claims that like 10% of UNRWA staff is like a part of Hamas, which like there is no evidence for that. Like a lot of as I said, a lot of countries then reinstated funding for UNRWA like months after. And like for UNRWA, they do like I think they don't they try to run like background checks on their employees. Like I think out of like even 23,000 employees that they have, like Israel only like accused them of like having like 9 individuals who participated directly in the October 7 attack. So that's a pretty low number.
Right. Yeah, and I don't even. I don't. To me, that seems like not that big of an issue. Yeah, it's like you always, in every NGO, there's always people that are abusing their position and doing illegal things. Police officers are involved in drug trade. It's just it's endless seeing this. So you should expect any organization is going to have some actors within that organization doing things they shouldn't do. That doesn't mean the entire organization is rotten to the core, right? So I've always considered that pretty much a non-issue. I do see we have Justin here as well. Pizza, do you wanna any final thoughts or questions, and then we're gonna bring Justin on. And you're welcome to stick around. I just want to give the floor to Justin for a little bit.
Yeah. So the last thing that I'll say before I give the floor to someone else, it's also regarding military strategy. So I heard that if you want to do like counterterrorism, like what you should do is go into a place and basically like do a full sweep, like hold the territory and like rebuild it. But from my understanding is that what Israel does is like they go to certain parts of Gaza and like they do like just small incursions and then they leave, and then like that's how Hamas is able to come back, and then they re-invade that place, and like they do that like several times. And a big reason why they don't hold territory is because it takes a lot of troops, and it can also has like a high casualty, like holding on to territory, because you could be exposed to ambush attacks.
Correct.
So yeah, I wanted to make sure, like, because you said earlier that they're controlling like 60% of Gaza, so there's probably like large chunks of Gaza that they haven't even controlled. So that's probably like
I think
probably like place where
the 40% that they currently don't hold, they haven't held, from what I know. And there's the areas they currently hold, they've held on many occasions, and they've left and had to come back. There's an account I'm going to share here in chat. His name's Seth Frantzman. He's a military analyst, pro-Israel. And the reason I say pro-Israel is because I think it lends credibility to the critique he gives of Israel's strategy in Gaza, right? He's not just trying to attack Israel. Yeah, he would prefer to be able to say how good of a job Israel is doing, but he's been extremely critical of how Israel's operating in Gaza, and he just calls it a colossal failure. So actually, we should probably get him on for a stream. I've been meaning to reach out to him. Let me
like from my understanding is that Israel has been very risk averse in the sense that they don't hold on to territory. They just do like incursions, like small incursions, and they're also like heavily reliant on airstrikes. So like when you do like that proportionality calculations, like usually what you want to think about is like is the level of damage worth like the military goals, and whether or not you want to send in your own troops, risk them like being exposed to like possibly being like attacked or like killed by Hamas, or would you rather like do airstrike instead? And they've been like very heavily reliant on airstrikes. So like when someone first like when someone says like well how would you want the military operation to go differently? Like what I would usually say, like it's basically to not be as risk averse, like not to rely on airstrikes as much, and basically just like hold on to territory, even though that might lead to obviously like soldiers dying. You can't just expect like zero soldier fatality during a war. Like hold on to territory and like map out exactly where are the like the shafts, because like from my understanding is that when Israel like destroys tunnels, like they don't actually destroy the tunnel. What they usually target is the shaft, right? Because like the tunnels themselves, they're like quite deep underground and they're reinforced with concrete. So unless if they're like dropping like heavy like bunker buster bombs, like they're not really doing like any damage to the tunnels themselves. So usually when they're destroying tunnels, they're talking about the shafts, right? Like the entrances. So like so it like yeah, so just hold on to territory, like map out the shafts, and whenever like they do hold on to territory, like from like I heard this from someone, is that you see very little activity from like the tunnels from the shafts, because they basically know exactly where they are and like they can just shut them down. So this would lead to like even though it would lead to more soldier casualties, it will lead less the person just left. But anyways, like
Right.
yeah, that's what I would say. Like I'll
So
just wrap it up real quick.
yeah.
So that's what I'll say like on how like I would have liked to see the operation have gone like differently. Like I'm not sure like if, but I'm not like a lot of the claims that I'm talking about are things that like I read on Twitter. Like so I'm not sure like if it has like some misinfo or like if you have like a different alternative plan
No, so
or like a different answer for the
no,
question.
I for the most part agree with your assessment. The one thing that I would modify is they are using bunker buster bombs as well. They are targeting tunnels with bunker buster bombs,
Right.
but overwhelmingly that's not the munitions they're using for the airstrikes. It's very true that Israel is extremely risk averse, more so than I haven't found another example in the 21st century of of a specific stat that I'm about to share. And it's actually a ratio very few people focus on, but it's the ratio of how many of your own soldiers were killed relative to how many civilians of the other side were killed. And that number is around 1 to 180, maybe all the way up to 200. That's crazy. For example, in Syria, it was 1 to 1.5. Iraq, which also had a very high ratio, was only 1 to 70. So we're talking about like almost 3 times worse ratio than in Iraq. Now, somebody would say, well, what do you mean? That just means the soldiers are operating well. But no, they're not operating well because we're talking about how many civilians have been killed. So not only is the civilian to combatant ratio in Gaza likely the worst in the 21st century, the ratio between how many of our own we've sacrificed relative to their civilians is also the highest in the 21st century. Unless you take um, examples that only rely on airstrikes, right? So when the U.S. drone programs, for example, that had like a zero U.S. deaths, right? So those are outlier examples. But in terms of coming and taking territory and holding territory, Israel's extremely risk averse, and we see the cost civilians are paying for it. Now, I'm not saying I want more Israeli soldiers to die. I don't. I just want less civilians to die. Now, here we actually do see a real problem. If you were to tell Israelis, and I don't think Israelis are unique in this regard, if you were to tell Israelis the only way to take over Gaza, like if you were to come and say, we're killing too many civilians, we need to be sacrificing more of our own, they think you're mad. They're like, what are you talking about? We're not going to sacrifice more of our own. You could kill thousands of them just to save one of ours. Militaries very rarely, and by very rarely, it's like never, are going to care for the civilians of the other side more than they care about their own soldiers. That incentive does not exist naturally to care about the civilians of the other side. And that's why we need international law and a way to hold those who violate international law accountable, because there's no reason for a military to care about killing their enemy's civilians. If they could save their own and kill thousands just to save one, why wouldn't they? Their people would want them to do it. They would want to do it. So we need an international system that knows how to stop that from happening and create an incentive, a counter incentive, right? That makes a military think in terms of, okay, I need to achieve my military goals, but I can't just be killing excess number, like whatever amount of civilians to achieve those goals. The point of the military is to pursue the national interests of the state. If we believe as a nation that this is an essential interest of ours, then we need to be able to take that sacrifice. And if not, then it's not important enough. If we can't sacrifice our own to hold Gaza, then Gaza is not important enough to hold.
I'm not gonna add anything more. Like I'm gonna leave the floor to someone else. The last thing that I will like say for real is that I would be interested if you were to talk to this Seth Franceman individual, like about like perhaps military strategy and like what he thinks Israel could have done better. I think that would be an
Yeah,
interesting, like very informative.
I'm gonna reach out to him, and I dropped the link if anybody wants to check out his stuff. He does good.
Yeah.
He does good commentary.
Okay, well, sounds good. Have a good day.
Awesome Pizza Slice. Thanks for joining. Justin, you want to come back on? Okay, cool. We'll bring you back. Thanks for your patience. Justin, what's up, man?
Yeah, Dar. So he kind of went over everything in the world. So the issue with the food is that before October 7th, we had about 500 to 600 trucks that were entering Gaza daily. In addition to those amount of trucks, we had agricultural production of food in the Gaza Strip, along with lambs and sheep and chicken and all that stuff. So now we're looking at 150 trucks, 100 trucks, sometimes even less, sometimes no trucks. And then also take into consideration that the amount of the land, I mean, it's like about a year ago we determined that 85% of the land that was able to produce agricultural food, like grow food, was destroyed. So it doesn't make sense to me that people argue that there wasn't like food shortages, famine. I mean, maybe the definition of famine is different for other people, just like, genocide and ethnic cleansing and other stuff. But just quantity wise, it makes a huge difference, because if we went from 600 trucks a day to, plus we had trade, because people were trading, plus we had, land, Gaza has some good land for agriculture. There was a lot of farming communities that grew food. So all of this has been reduced. So it's almost, it just doesn't make sense that these people are going to say that that there is no signs of famine or famine coming or things like that. And now we're seeing it because when you have starvation, it could take several months for us to see the effect. And I think right now what we're seeing is the effect of months, because and it hits first with the children and the newborn, because we're seeing pictures of babies. I think Benny here told me a statistics the other day about half the babies' birth rates are down by almost 50%. So that's the first sign of famine. So famine doesn't happen overnight. And I know a lot of people would say that, in the next 2 days, 14,000 people are going to die. We know that these people ran away with these stories and stuff. But we have to understand that if you look at famine and you look at, starvation, that this is a process. And not just that, but the effects of famine, even if, for example, all food was to be open and we get food and all this other stuff, we know that once you're at this level of starvation and famine, it's going to have repercussions. Children are not going to develop the way they should. It's going to affect them when they become teenagers. We're going to have diseases. We're going to have sort of like deficiencies and things like that. So I think that's a very important point. The other thing was that we touched on the court when we talked about the recognition, France and now other European Union countries recognizing Palestine, and you're seeing that as a reward for October 7th, and it kind of puts you in a bad position, because it's something that should have happened a long time ago, but unfortunately we're reactionary people. But let me flip it, and I can flip it and say that the tactic of withholding food from the people of Gaza was used as a weapon to basically corner Hamas and to make them negotiate, and also to get the public to protest and to go. And we actually even did see that happen when people started to protest against the ruling authority in Gaza. They were crushed brutally. And so at the same time that these people rose, there was nobody, including the Palestinian Authority, was able to go and to offer them assistance. You can't tell a starving population, hey, rise up and go against the regime that's ruling you. So this puts into question that when what's his name? Is it Gantz? Not Gantz. The first defense minister.
Gallant.
Gallant, yeah. When he said, he said in mayim, in ochel, in chashmad, no electricity, no food, no this. This was a weaponization. This is a collective punishment. This is clear war crimes, and there were war crimes that were used. And now, can we flip and say that war crimes are now being rewarded? It's the same way we can say October 7th is being rewarded, because now you have these states recognizing. So was the recognition of Palestine, was it because of October 7th, or was it because of Israel's reaction and war crimes and path of genocide and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank? These were the reasons why these countries have moved. It wasn't because of October 7th. It was because Israel has shown itself to be irresponsible, to take a situation and to go on a genocidal path in one part of Palestine and on a massive ethnic cleansing path on another one. And we need to judge it for what it is, rather than saying that it was because of Hamas. And in fact, the recognition of Palestine by these agencies was in the face of Hamas, because it was the Palestinian Authority who was represented yesterday at the UN. It wasn't Hamas. It was international recognition to strengthen the Palestinian Authority, which Israel has been undermining for the last 20 years. So strengthening them, establishing more international recognition for them, is actually counterproductive to Hamas, because it's going against everything that Hamas has been saying we cannot achieve. We cannot achieve through the UN or international court system. The only way we can achieve this, so the PA can now say, we now have international recognition among, some G7 countries. France is on board.
Mm-hmm.
The UK will soon be on board. And I'm not going to fool myself and tell you that everything's going to change, because international recognition doesn't mean shit until we can get the same platform that other countries have, which is to sanction these aggressive states that carry out war crimes against us, and get, enforcement of these. And that's when we'll see it. So this is a path to there. To recognizing Palestinian, to recognizing that there's a path to a future for Palestine through the means of the international system, and it's actually contradiction to what these other peoples are doing, because they think they can do it through military means. Because we know that people who seek military resistance, armed resistance, which is our right, but at the same time it may be counterproductive. Do we want to turn the West Bank into Gaza? Do we want to give Ben Gvir and Netanyahu and company, do we want to give him the green light to do to Gaza, to do to the West Bank what they did in Gaza? And of course, this is going to be, so it's a strategy, and it's a strategy. And I think when you said that two-staters are Israeli two-staters or Palestinian two-staters, I didn't understand that when you said that earlier.
Said what? When two-staters what?
To people who support two-state.
Where you keep
about the UN.
You keep cutting.
You said that earlier. You said, okay, let me say it again. Earlier, you said that people who are two-staters, supporters of a two-state solution, were complaining.
No, on the Israeli side.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason is that this complaint is because, again, if they're going to see it as a reward, it's like, Israel digs itself in these ditches, and then they complain about the consequences, because this two-state or the recognition and stuff is something that should have been done before. And again, it has to be done on the flip side. If Israel succeeds in creating a rebellion and a change in Gaza, which is more internationally accepting, and they will say, you see, starving the population, committing war crimes, destroying the means of life worked. And I think that this sets a dangerous precedent. And this is what we should be more concerned, rather than saying that, oh, they got recognition because of October 7th, which it wasn't the case. I've made it clear why they got recognition. It had nothing to do with October 7th. It had to do with what Israel's been doing since October 7th. And that I would be more concerned with rewarding war crimes, rewarding settlements and settlement terrorism and things like that, because I think that that's what's happening right now, and that's definitely more concerning than all this other saying that we're rewarding. And I think if we look at it from that point of view, we should fear these things much more, because now we've seen it happen. We saw it happen in Azerbaijan with the Armenians, and we're seeing it happening in Palestine. Tomorrow, other countries, India will say, hey, we're going to wipe out Kashmir. Hey, the Israelis did it. Why can't we do it? The Sudanese will do it to Darfur. Israel did it. Hell, they got away with it. We can do it. The Turks will do it to the Kurdish. So this is the reason why we need enforcement of international law to be applied and to be practiced among all people like it should, rather than the selective nations that we seem to apply it to.
Yep, agreed. You made an interesting point about how this is going to be seen as a win for the PA because they can make the case that you don't need violence to get recognition. But I feel like Hamas and their supporters can make the case that the reason this recognition happened is because of Hamas's violence led to Israel's response, which put the Palestinian cause, front and center of people's minds, and that's what got them to recognize statehood. So I think both sides are going to be able to claim a victory here.
They will.
Yeah.
They will, and they already are. And most apologists do that. Most apologists for Iran and Hamas are doing that already.
Right.
But I think the debate needs to see, the problem is if we don't move on and we don't pursue it, I think that there's going to be reconciliation. And there's going to be a reconciliation is that, was it worth the price? And this is the reason why I get into it with a lot of people, especially from other Arab countries, is that they're willing to say it was worth the price. So my people in Gaza saying, and I think even like in the West Bank, I think Corey did a video where he asked people, he was walking around and asking people, was October 7th worth it? And I think I don't think anybody said it was worth it, because what happened as a result of October 7th, which was very predictable. I mean, nobody here, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I was pretty clear that this was going to lead to what we just saw happen already. So I think that even though there are certain wins that did happen, things, international recognition, Israel more of a pariah, et cetera, et cetera. These are wins for people that are not Palestinians. These are wins for people who are interested in delegitimizing Israel, fighting Israel, and even some people with anti-Semitic motivations and things like that. But from a Palestinian perspective, which we need to bring it back, we need to bring it back to Palestine. Palestinians need to take their issue, grab the bulls by the horn, stop letting these Egyptians and Qataris and everybody else and their mother negotiate for us. I used to be a big critic of Saudi Arabia, but I have to say that Saudi Arabia is actually doing something very interesting. They're throwing their power, whatever their motivation is. But even if you look at the UN speech yesterday by the Saudi foreign minister, he was backing the Palestinian people. He wasn't speaking for them. He wasn't speaking on their behalf. He was backing them and saying, we need to enable these people to control their destiny, to control their institutions, to build institutions, to build their economy and things like that. And I think that this just shows the difference between these other countries that are fighting proxy wars, like the Qataris are fighting proxy wars now in Somalia with the UAE and then Sudan, and then they were doing it in Syria and in Libya. They're doing it everywhere. And I think that one of my biggest criticism of Hamas is that they allowed themselves to be played as a tool for proxy war by Israel, by Iran, and by the Qataris specifically. And they know this, and they said, well, what did you expect us to do? We needed money, we needed weapons, we needed to do something, so we grabbed onto, the lifeline that was thrown at us. So this is their comments, and their comments were criticized, like, why are you turning to the Iranians? The Iranians, definitely what they're doing to the people in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, and this was a response. And it kind of goes against this, the whole concept is that the reason why these people are doing what they're doing is because the alternative has been failed. But now that we have an initiative that's going to back, and I don't want to say, build the Palestinian Authority of what it is right now. The Palestinian Authority is filled with stuff that needs to be reformed. But we do have a commitment from countries like Saudi Arabia that's saying that we want to support a reformed Palestinian Authority, not the Palestinian Authority that we have now, but a Palestinian governing agency that will look to become a nation-building authority rather than a revolutionary movement, one that's going to build institutions, build a future for Palestinians. And I think that I'm more positive now, and it's funny because Dr. Mustafa al-Barghouti, he's a very, how should I say this, very pessimistic guy. Everything he says is really, really sad. But one thing he said that surprised me is he said, we are closer today to becoming a state with full recognition than ever before. And I kind of stood back and said, wow, he's actually very positive. So we have moved forward, but we moved forward not because of October 7th. We moved forward because of Israel, what Israel did and what Israel's face has shown, what they've done with the settler movement. Just today, for example, yesterday, A Palestinian was killed. He was one of the people who worked on the film No Other Land.
Yeah, that
He was
was sad.
murdered by a settler. And guess what? The person who murdered him right now is sitting in his home in Jerusalem. He's not in a jail
Right.
cell. He wasn't shot by police. He's at home right now, sipping on tea and eating, and I'm sure being welcomed and visited by people in the Knesset.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the face of Israel. This is the people who are carrying out Israel's policies. This is the true face of the Israeli government. And this is what is bringing about the European Union and other countries to say, it's time to recognize Palestine. We're not going to wait for Netanyahu. We're not going to wait for the United States. We're not going to wait for all these powers, because they have failed. They're not interested in negotiation. They're not interested in a settlement. So we have to take the initiative. Without the United States and without, of course, Israel, can this happen? It's going to be difficult. So this is a beginning and a movement that the Palestinians, along with the Saudis, along with the European Union, have to continue to work on, because we can, depending on the United States as a honest broker or as a mediator, has failed. It's failed big time, and it's cost us our lives. So anyone who wants to say that this is a reward for October 7th, they're just really, really not. It's being a very self-centered, how should I say it, narcissist view of this whole conflict.
Right. And it's interesting. First off, I do want to read a comment that somebody asked who I'm speaking to, and I said, Justin, a Palestinian friend. Should I be presenting you that way? Should I be saying your name? How do you prefer? Is Justin your official pseudonym?
Yeah.
Okay. And then he goes, oh, he sounds exactly like Ihab Hassan in terms of the message. That's a compliment, right?
Ihab Hassan?
Could you imagine if he said...
Okay, yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
Could you imagine...
That's a compliment.
Could you imagine if he said he sounds exactly like Ahmed Al-Khatib? What would you say to that?
No.
Okay,
let me explain.
Before I just want to say one point, and then because I know you have issue with Ahmed. We have had him on the show, but I'll let you share your issue with him. Hamas is going to take is going to take credit for these countries recognizing a Palestinian state. And if we ever get to a situation where Hamas ultimately comes to terms with Israel's existence, people would be able to attribute that to Israel's aggression and Israel's operation in Gaza. But we actually need to resist giving these people credit, because sure, you could point to mass violence leading to some favorable result after the cessation of that violence, but you need to prove that those results were unachievable without that level of violence. Or the only way anyone should get credit for their violence is if they've proven that they've exhausted all other options and that they couldn't have gotten there any other way. So if Israel can show some good that came from what they've done to Gaza, that doesn't absolve them of the bad. And if Hamas can make the case that October 7th led to something good for Palestinians, that does not absolve them of October 7th. I think we just need to, the peacemakers upon us need to be clear about that message. Now, go ahead and share your thoughts without trashing him too much, because he's not here.
No problem. The thing is that there's definitely some things that he says, Ahmed will say that,
we're talking about Ahmed Al-Khatib.
So there's nothing wrong with
I just want to give people context. Ahmed
but as far as
go ahead.
He, and again, but there's also some things. I don't question what he says or his positions as far as Palestine internally and stuff. I just question his motivation. Ahab, by the way, is a great guy. I actually probably follow him more than anyone. I know him in real life. We're actually good friends, and we've actually met and we've done activity work together. So yeah, I'm very much like him. I take that as a compliment. Thank you. And I think that he's a very intelligent guy. He's smart. He's a very pragmatic, and he definitely has the interest of Palestine. He's an organic voice for Palestine, and when he speaks with Palestine in his heart. I kind of feel that the problem I have with Ahmed and people like Samir Sinajlawi is that I feel that they don't speak to the Palestinians as their audience. people like me, people like Ahab, I think we are trying to address our people and to do what we need to do to make things better and move forward. I think that's a different perspective than someone who is paid to say the same things, but to speak to a different audience and to basically like cover for war crimes. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, I could also see a case that like Ahmed could say, my goal is not to speak to my people, it's to speak to the other side, and this is how I compel them. But what is interesting is because a lot of his framing is realign for Palestine. He wants this to be what it means. He wants to build a pro-Palestine movement. But the critique that I hear from many Palestinians is that the way he's messaging it just is not appealing to most Palestinians.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I never really understood him 100%, and I think his performance on the Jubilee kind of like threw me over the edge with him. I used to send messages and say, hey, you know, if the guy has a point, let's give him a break. Let's cut him some slack. His performance at the Jubilee, I don't know if you actually criticize that, right? Any Palestinian who would say that his grandmother experience in the Nakba was due because of the Arab armies, I mean, he took a position that I just was like,
yeah,
wow.
That's a wild one.
That to me, like said, that's how do we say it? An expression we have in Arabic, we have an expression is that I jumped out of the window. It made me jump out of the window. It means like, that's it. So I think that convinced me that the guy, and plus I've seen text messages and stuff, and it is enough is enough. And I'm gonna send you a message one of these days about some other things that are happening in the background with some people who are in the Palestinian community in the United States who are working about some other issues. I don't want to air out the laundry and stuff, but like I said, to me, it's like, who are you speaking to? We need voices to speak to our people. We need people to speak to our people, but do it for the sake of love of our country and empowering our people to build ourselves. Because we have I don't want a Palestinian people to always be dependent on foreign aid and foreign support and stuff like that. We have to also recognize that I don't know if you saw the person George, I think his name George Abdallah, who was released from jail 40 years afterwards in France. He was in jail for 4 years in France, and he's in Lebanon now. He's a Palestinian activist. I believe he's Lebanese. And he gave a speech when he arrived to Lebanon that was like powerful, because he said, like, look at people like Greta. You have, I think is she Swedish? She's Swedish, right? Swedish?
I think so, yeah.
So he said, a young woman from Sweden that gets on a boat and goes across the Mediterranean, and all these people who volunteer to get on a boat and break this, this blockade. And then these are, and so we have to understand that we have people, including introduced. I knew him already, but Adam sent me some information about Yonatan, the religious Hasidic Jewish guy who walks around the West Bank defending Palestinians.
Yeah, Yonatan, we're gonna get him on.
That would be great. I've known about him for I think a year or two. I've known about him.
Okay.
And people like Andre, who I remember Andre.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's a good guy in some of the organizations that he worked with. So I think that the theme that's important for Palestinians at this time, what is more critical, is what's called co-resistance. And I got this term from Professor Smadar. I'm so bad with name. I think her name is Smadar Ben Natan or something like that. And she's a professor at the university. She's an Israeli professor at the University of Oregon. And so these alliances we need to cultivate these alliances, because they serve, it's Palestinian solidarity. This is the key thing. And this is the future. This is the path that we have to seek, because why? It is the path, first of all, that's working, because what brought about the opening of Gaza was the pressure from the West. It wasn't because Israel was fearing Egypt or Jordan or the other countries. They're not. It was the articles that's been flashing all over the West in the media. It was the protest of the tens of thousands of people who took to the streets in Santiago, that took to the streets in New York and Paris and London.
Right.
This is the pressure that Israel's reaction to. And unfortunately, the opposite's happening in the Arab world. In Jordan, an influencer was arrested because he criticized the siege, and he criticized the lack of what Jordan is doing. And in Egypt, the Al-Azhar University issued a statement condemning, what's happening. And guess what? The government, cracked down on them. In Egypt, there was a busload of people coming from Tunisia and from Libya, and they were coming to the Rafah border to make a stand and say, open this border, allow food in. They didn't make it. They were stopped in Sinai, and the Egyptians turned them back. So to me, it's like, am I going to be loyal to so-called the Arab brothers and sisters who they're so mired in their own domestic and internal problems? I don't feel they're very useful to me right now. I'd rather side with Israelis and Western people who say, hey, you're an equal person. You deserve rights just like us. I don't want this, hey, you need to accommodate and then be less than us. And, this is another issue. But there are people out there who do that. And this is the alliances we need to build. And this is the people we need to build.
I'm with you on that. Co-resistance. Cool. Fuck yeah. And I'm gonna
coexistence, co-resistance until coexistence.
Nice.
That's my
I like that. Let's make merch.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, Justin, you could stick around. There's a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm gonna do some.
Because I'm gonna meet with some. Oh, go ahead for the questions, but I'm gonna step down. But
okay.
I'm actually gonna exit as well.
Thanks for joining, Justin. Cool. Let's see. First of all, so I streamed this to Twitch, even though I've never advertised Twitch. It's like an option on the streaming software I use. So I'm like, why not? Let's send it to Twitch. Once in a while, we get like one person pop in, but we have 2 viewers on Twitch right now. So we've doubled our all-time high on Twitch. Let's go. But this is being primarily viewed on Twitter right now, and then on YouTube, and then Twitch is by far last. But hey, get to see our Twitch people here. Maybe over time we'll grow following. You know what? To the people watching on Twitch, welcome. Tell your friends about it. What do you do on Twitch? Are there followers there, subscribers? I'm so not a Twitch person. Whatever. Give me whatever on Twitch. Spread the word to your friends. Let's blow this stream up. And you know what? That message goes out to everybody, not just the Twitch viewers. But on Twitch, one of our guys' names Coop, with a lot of K's before the Coop. So is that like an ode to the KKK? Perhaps. Okay. Not free Palestine. Before that, stop killing humans. There might be some grammatical issue. I'm not trying to understand that, but okay, stop killing humans. I'm with you. Didn't you all Jews learn it from the Holocaust? So it's interesting. I hear this often. People say, and it's an intuitive thing to say that after what we experienced in the Holocaust, we should know not to inflict this pain and suffering on others. But unfortunately, that's just not how humans respond to trauma. Traumatized individuals, more often than not, become less compassionate towards others, less open to others. They become more fearful, more radical, more aggressive. So, and to some extent, the Holocaust and our persecution in Europe put it was a hate that was put into us that we then put that into the Palestinians, and they put that back into us in return. This is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but if I'm to sum up the conflict in an even more simplistic quote, because sometimes simplicity helps us understand certain dynamics. It's hurt people, right? If you're a hurt person, you're more likely to hurt others. So that's important to keep in mind. We just need to break this cycle that the people living between the river and the sea are not hurt, that they're healed. It might take some therapy, a generation, and a fair bit of psychedelics, but it's possible. Alex, you asked what about the Warsaw Ghetto? I imagine this is in reference to when I said we shouldn't give credit to violence, even if it achieves a goal, when that goal otherwise could have been achieved in another way. Is that what the Warsaw question is in reference to? Because if so, first of all, I don't think Warsaw achieved any goal, right? They were still killed, but that was certainly a legitimate uprising. But the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was not like October 7th. There were no attacks on civilians. That was attacking Germans who were entering their ghetto in order to round them up and send them to camps. Palestinians do have a right to resist. Hamas has a right to fight for the rights of their people, but that doesn't entail massacring civilians, right? Abstract law says maybe humans have the capacity to do violence regardless of if they've experienced trauma. I would say that's certainly true. I think we're wired for violence. I think our ability to be violent is what kept us alive. We are the offspring of very violent people. So yeah, it's not only traumatized people, but I get the sense, and when you look at the data on how trauma manifests itself, there's a pretty clear case that traumatized people, it doesn't make them more open to others and more empathetic to others. It closes them off. So I would say, yeah, even with no trauma, we're capable of violence, but being traumatized certainly increases our proclivity towards violence. You want me to check the other videos? Yeah, hold on. Oh, I see Alex is raising his hand right now. Alex, I'm going to bring you on in a few minutes. I'm just going to do a quick review of another video that was sent. This is sent by David. Oh, it's by Israel's official Twitter account. That's tried and tested, true to their word, trustworthy. Every tweet of the day, right? We know that to be true. Anyways, let's see. Hundreds of aid trucks are stuck inside Gaza. Israel cleared them. The UN refused to distribute them. This is not a delay. It is deliberate ploy to defame Israel. The UN is failing the people of Gaza. UN, get your act together and distribute aid. Okay, let's see what the community note says. Israel has forbidden the UN and its agencies to distribute aid, right? So this is Israel's official statement. What the UN is saying is Israel ordered a near total halt of food and humanitarian aid delivered to over 2 million Gazans facing territorial war threat. Let's see. Humanitarian assistance must never be used as a bargaining chip in any conflict, Al-Khatin said. The weaponization of food for civilians, in addition to restricting or preventing their access to life-sustaining services, constitutes a war crime. But I want more info as how this bargaining chip was used, right? That's still pretty abstract. Okay, I would need to read this more thoroughly, but the UN, I'll give you just a snippet of what the UN said because I do have that saved. The UN has repeatedly claimed that Kogat is an Israeli, the Israeli unit that deals with coordination in the West Bank and Gaza. The UN has repeatedly claimed that Kogat has refused its request for collection and distribution authorization, and that dangerous and complex conditions inside Gaza made distribution very difficult. According to the UN, Israel's restrictions and permit rejections are the reason for the mounting stockpiles of aid at the crossings, as aid organizations are regularly barred from transferring aid to warehouses and distribution sites. Convoys that don't coordinate their travel with Israeli authorities and do not have hard-to-obtain approvals come under deadly IDF fire. So who do we want to believe? Well, I would say that the UN is more trustworthy on this for a simple reason. If Israel was so keen on the UN distributing aid to Gazans, then they wouldn't have halted the UN from distributing aid in the first place. The UN was in charge of food distribution in Gaza. Israel stopped that from happening and stopped food from coming in, and now they want to blame the UN. So I'm not buying it. Not buying it. Luddy Von Beat says pro-Palestine moderator. Are you talking about me? Like I'm a pro-Palestine moderator? I'm pro-Palestinian. Pro the people of Palestine. Same way I'm pro the people of Israel. In general, I just think it's good to be pro-people, you know? Even though we're a very destructive species. You could even make the case that we act as a cancer. But I think there's a great purpose to humanity. We have separated ourselves from other animals for good and for bad, and allow us to explore the universe, both by going outward and inward. Inward can be outward. We know what that means, exploring the cosmos. Inward can be looking at the microscopic things that make everything. Inward could also be our own wirings. But I fall into the category of optimistic nihilist. So I don't think that there's any real purpose to the universe, or at the very least, I don't know how we can know what the purpose of the universe is. But nihilism is like, there's no reason to live, whatever. It's almost depressing. But optimistic nihilism is, well, we don't know if there's a purpose, but we're here. Let's make the best out of it. Let's build an awesome world for all people and all species living on planet. Like, why not? If you're already here, let's fucking kill it, you know? That's optimistic nihilism. So I don't know if the purpose of life is for us to exist, but the fact that we exist, let's try to improve our quality of life. Let's try to reduce suffering, increase flourishing. Let's explore the cosmos. Maybe we find friends out there one day. Maybe we understand that we don't even need to get to them physically to communicate with them by going inward. There's just so much to explore. And to me, that seems like it makes life worth living. And it makes life worth preserving. So yeah, I'm going to be pro-Palestinian, because they too are humans, just like you, my friend, just like you. We're going to do 2 more comments, and then so Luddy, your comment, we don't delete any comments. YouTube has a very strict comment deletion. They auto delete. So if you said something problematic, they very well may have deleted it automatically, but we don't delete anything. That could be read as J007 or Jew7. Let's go with the Jew7. I like Jew7. Asks, hi, bro. Great to hear your thoughts. How common is Nakba denial in Israel? How important do you think overcoming it is in achieving peace? Most Israelis recognize that there was a mass displacement, but it seems like it's either that they left because Arab leaders told them to leave, you know, that narrative, leave so we could win the war and then you could come back. Or it's just like you waged war, you lost, tough luck. So there's an acknowledgement that was a mass displacement. They just don't view it as something particularly sad. I would say part of reconciliation is acknowledging each other's catastrophes and tragedies and the pain we've inflicted on one another. I think is going to be important for reconciliation. Do I think it's essential? No, and the reason for that is the United States, has committed immense atrocities towards Native Americans. They have a very poor history with Black Americans, and America didn't go through proper reconciliation with those groups. They kind of just worked to integrate them into society, didn't really apologize, and moved on. So you could see something like that happening here. But I do think some of the existing tensions that currently exist between white and Black America, or the challenges we see in the Native American community, could to some extent be alleviated through a better reconciliation process. And certainly in South Africa, there was not good reconciliation done, and South Africa is not a success story. Cool. I'm going to bring Alex. I'm going to bring you on. You're going to have the floor for 5 or so minutes, and then we're going to do more Q&A because there's a lot of questions coming in. And for those in chat, I don't think we'll be able to get to all questions, so we're going to need to prioritize super chats. So if anyone wants to toss a super chat, we'll take it. Cool, Alex. What's up, man?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate your channel anyway. I've been following it for a while, so
thank you.
Appreciate your work. Thanks. Yeah, I was just I kind of sort of my personal interest in this. I mean, there's this twofold here. So I grew up like in the Soviet Union. So, and I guess of Jewish background, right? You know how the Soviets, right? How they decided who was a Jew or not, depending on what was in your paper, right? Kind of an interesting thing. I don't know how it works out for like American Jews or whatever, but for like a Soviet Jew, it's like we didn't really have, we didn't really follow Judaism or anything like that, right? That was in the past,
Wait, so how do they determine if you're Jewish?
In the Soviet Union, they had this thing. Well, first of all, they had a birth certificate. So in a birth certificate, they would say who the parents were by so-called nationality, what we call ethnicity, right? So determined like that. And then also by the fifth line in the passport, in the Soviet internal passport, there was also ethnicity. So like American passport or any European passport does not have anything like that. The passport is your citizenship and that's it, right? In the Soviet passport, internal one, you have the ethnicity written in. And that's how majority of like Soviet Jews in generally, right? How we, like, of course we had remnants of Jewish culture, such as like speaking Yiddish or something like that. Like at home, like my grandmother could still do it. Like my father could not anymore. And everything, right? But then the Soviet Union generally is the atheist country, right? So we're like the only synagogue I ever knew was always closed. So that's how it worked out. So what I'm trying to explain is that just my background is I know very well the Soviet. I have family in Israel, so I have like Soviet Jews. Kind of like I'm familiar with this specific demographic, right? Who came. And then my other take on this is that I also happen to be a Christian. So I'm actually very familiar with Christian Zionism. And that's kind of like two streams where I work through. So that's just my thing.
Okay. So yeah, you
a bit of an introduction.
Thank you, Alex. You emailed me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Now I'm connecting. And we spoke on Twitter as well. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm glad
I don't on Twitter. Twitter I must have spoken,
yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's just to give the background, where I'm coming from. I'm kind of working through these two things, but those could be discussed separately. Like each one has its own interest in sort of, it has its sort of aspects that are somewhat, maybe unique in some ways. Like, for example, I don't know if anybody knows, but like if you're in Israel, for example, and if you don't speak Hebrew, and if you ask somebody whether they spoke English, and if they say no, in my personal experience, they're either French Jews or they're Soviet Jews. So I usually speak Russian, and 3/4 of the time they respond.
That's funny.
Kind of interesting. Yeah, just an observation.
Anyway. I spent a month in I spent a month in Moscow, so I know some basic Russian.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. When were you there?
2019. I enjoyed it a lot.
All right.
I feel like it's an underrated city.
Yeah. I think to be honest, last time I was in Moscow in 2008, but they say even in 2008, it was already kind of impressive compared to what it was like, in the 80s, right? And then people say, well, in the last 10 years, it's improved a lot. But of course, that's its own story, mired in its own conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of write books about all this crap. So like I wrote the book about Christian Zionism, I wrote the book about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and so on and so forth, right? Because actually I'm from Ukraine, like Soviet, but I always emphasize that I'm from Soviet Ukraine because like modern state of Ukraine is a bit of a different thing. So anyway, right. So I wanted to comment on your I think Justin, right, was spoken, right? And I was kind of following a lot of like the accounts. Well, like I mentioned, the Hab Hassan and everything else like that. Like, I don't necessarily see that when people, every, like the sort of the action on October 7th, right? I find it like it's not as simple as to qualify just as a crime, because obviously crimes were committed. There's no doubt about that. Crimes against civilians and so forth, and, taking civilian hostages. So that aspect of it is not really disputed, in my opinion. But then there were also like, it had to, before that even happened, right? There had to be like a massive breach and attack in military installations, right? And in that regard, I don't see that as illegitimate, Like, for example,
I agree.
That's why I brought up the war.
I agree.
I brought up the I brought up the war, so the ghetto, and that's
there's a way in which October 7th could have been entirely legitimate, and there's also a way Israel's response to October 7th could have been legitimate, but neither were. Right. How they were carried out, neither were. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I tend to sort of think, like, if you're, let's say you're Palestinian, right? I'm not a Palestinian, so I don't know how people think exactly, but my view of it is like this. It's like, here we have a pre-conflict, so we have October 6th, and you have a various set of circumstances that could produce October 7th, right? And, we can enumerate those, whether it's Gaza blockade or it has to do with, certain, like the Third Temple movement and things like that. There are attacks on Al-Aqsa and whatever, right? So there's this number of different things, like increasing attacks on the West Bank. You got incarceration, administrative detention in Israel. So, I mean, things like that obviously could have brought it on, right? So, and then I would think, if I'm a Palestinian, let's say in Gaza or West Bank or wherever, look at the situation and say, do I have a space here to like go really hard after Hamas, right? And even though all these things are on the forefront of their fight, right, it's still not a full-blown military conflict, number 6. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe in this circumstances, I can also advocate for, better situation, better governance within Gaza or within the West Bank or whatever. I can advocate whether, against Hamas, against PA, whatever, right? Then when October 7th happens, right, however that happened, right, it did happen, right? Now we have the Israeli response, right? I find the Palestinian position akin to, I bring up to my Soviet history when I see the Soviet history. So, like, for example, prior to 1941, prior to Germany attacking the Soviet Union, right? You have a situation where, I mean, obviously, at that time, Soviet Union is a totalitarian state, right? Obviously, it's a state that where, democratic rule of law is not really upheld all that much. And there's a lot of repressions. Now, of course, most of it happened 37, 38, not 39, 40, 41 or whatever. But then nevertheless, it's the present history. Gulags are going on and so forth. It's present history. And there's a lot of reason to highlight this injustice if you care about like the future of the Soviet Union or Russia or whatever. Right. But then when it happened, but then 1940 is, June 22nd, 1941 happens. And then Nazi Germany starts the totalitarian war of annihilation against the Soviet Union. Like, I mean, yeah, you can quibble the first few days, first few weeks, maybe. Then it becomes clear that they have a plan Ost, and then they're just annihilating everybody. First the Jews and the communists, then they go repressive against any minority, which is or majority for that matter, Slav, subhumans and so forth, right? And as that struggle goes on, like imagine you're in the middle Stalingrad at the moment, right? Like, let's say it's early 1943 and there's battle going on, right? Is there a space to now start voicing concerns about the Stalinist regime, right? Is there space for that? And I really question that because I follow like Ihab Hassan, his Twitter, right? And I see predominantly, I'm sorry to say, but there's Zionists that follow his account. They're not Palestinians that follow his account. And he brings up, Hamas executed some people there in Gaza, or Hamas did this, or Hamas did that. And I don't understand why should you be given fodder when you're really in Stalingrad at the moment?
So
that's my concern.
Yeah, I hear that. I think there's a few ways to look at this. I think many supporters of Israel, they don't see Palestinians criticizing their own and calling out Hamas, and that gives the impression that there's no self-critique. And then when people like Ihab Hassan are willing to courageously do it, it counters that notion. The same way, many supporters of Palestine think Jews are unwilling to criticize Israel. And then they come across my content and they're like, oh, wait a minute, there are some Jews who are willing to criticize Israel. There's an important role to be played with being an outlier in your community, especially when your community is not, might be blind to certain things or not open to certain ideas. I think it's important for, like, one of the reasons why I do what I do is I don't want us as a people to be doing this to others. I don't want the country I pay taxes to be doing this, but I feel almost embarrassed that by and large, the Jewish people and the Israeli people are supportive of something that's atrocious. So I feel like it's important for me to actually take a stand against the majority of my own people. And I think people like Ihab and Ahmed and John Aziz probably feel something similar. And I think they do play an important role in doing so. I also think that it's strategically good because if a lot of Israelis follow him, all of a sudden they're being exposed to a Palestinian. They're seeing a Palestinian as a human. They might support him for his Hamas content, and then, or his anti-Hamas content. Then all of a sudden he criticizes Israel. They're more open to hearing what he has to say because they trust him. So I think he's playing an important role with his activism, and I actually think we need more people to do that. And I also think that if you care about Palestinians, you shouldn't want them to live under Hamas rule. Right? Hamas is not the optimal. It's not the optimal government to negotiate peace with Israel, and it's not the optimal government to rule over the people of Gaza. So for many ways, I could see why he would want to do that, and I could also see strategic benefit to it.
Right. Yeah. No, I understand that point of view for sure.
Yeah.
But also, I do see, on the other hand, I do see like the way the comments go and everything is that I'll give you an example, right? Like just the propaganda construct, how it works, right? So October 7th happened once, right? And you have all these images of people who died, right, on October 7th. And then, October 8th rolls around and then everything goes in opposite direction. And now we have like, every few weeks, there's another October 7th that happens in Palestine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gaza specifically. And so to counter those images, right, many, let's say, Zionist accounts, right, they will be constantly recycling the images of October 7th as if it's justification for it, right? So in that sense, I see what he's doing. Like I said, I'm not disputing what you're saying, but on the other hand, what he's doing is he's recycling his own sort of images. In other words, to say that, kind of flexing and going around this sort of the 360 go around of daily cycle, right? Saying, oh, here's what Hamas did, look at that. And then they kind of give the photo, right? So that's just my concern personally.
Yeah. I mean, it could definitely work like that. I mean, the critique of him, it's just, it resonates so strongly with what I experience all the time. I
That's right.
I make anti-Israel claims all the time, and people say it's like, but this is used by those who want to destroy you and your family. Are you okay with that?
Right.
You know, and I have the same response. I say, yeah, I would rather those who are pro-Palestine see me as a voice that they trust, so they could take a humanist approach to freeing Palestine and not in, you know, in anti-Semitic approach or whatever other approach there is, right? So I think, you know, I'm cool.
No, fair
I'm
enough.
cool with that
Okay.
approach. But yeah, it could be used as
That's
fodder.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
And I was also wondering about this unrelated. Well, actually, because I'm trying to write something about all these things. Just from
Yeah,
myself.
I want to keep. I want to keep it concise, Alex, because I want to get back to some questions. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, just want to ask you a question, and then we can go further. So, you know, these accounts that are like on the Zionist side, and I'm just doing like I said, social media, a bit of a research on the Zionist side, like the ones that would say go scrape all sorts of videos that come from Gaza, and let's say out of 1,000 videos, they'll find somebody washing a car. You know, say, look, there's nothing wrong in Gaza. There's no starvation or whatever, or somebody selling vegetables, or somebody making cookies. Those kind of accounts, and I'm looking for, you know, somebody who's more familiar with the situation to collaborate to kind of see how the propaganda is created, because it's very powerful, and particularly like in the Christian Zionist circles, they can attest to it because they receive it all the time. And it's just a food for thought. Maybe you can come up with it later or think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give.
It has.
Look, I think that there's probably some coordinated propaganda campaign. So, and it's not. It doesn't need to be Israel is telling all their online influencers what message to send. But Israel makes an official statement, right? So, for example, we saw that there was the UN. There's the starvation. The pro-Israel side was denying starvation. And then the second Israel blamed the UN, the narrative in an instant changed. Okay, there is some starvation, but it's the UN's fault. That wasn't coordinated. Just there's many accounts that no matter what they say, no matter what happens, they will take Israel's word as truth, or always promote the pro-Israel argument. And that just propagates through WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups and social media. I don't even think it's as coordinated as many people think. It's a distributed network of influencers and activists who will support Israel by any means necessary, and any claim that comes out. Yeah, that's probably how it works with most issues. Doesn't need to be that coordinated.
Anyway, if you're interested sort of in analyzing, especially from the Christian Zionist angle, if you're interested in analyzing their propaganda, I'll be happy to sort of discuss it in more detail.
Yeah, sure. And happy to have you back on for a stream at some point. Also, someone here in chat is asking your surname so they could find your books. So post that in chat.
Sure. Put it in chat on YouTube, you mean, right?
No, here on Discord, actually. Here on Discord.
I actually don't know how to do it, to be honest.
You'll
I'm the first
Oh,
time.
good. Well, welcome to the community. We got an awesome crew here. You'll see on the click the speech bubble.
I see something.
Click the speech bubble, and then you'll see the chat.
I just did post something.
Okay, awesome.
I don't know if you can see it. I don't know.
No, you did not post in the right place.
No.
No. Where did you post? I have no idea where you posted.
Posted somewhere on Israel-Palestine's open dialogue circle or whatever, something like that.
Oh, okay.
It said,
yeah. So that's, I added you. Okay, but you see the little speech bubble here in. Whatever. I'm not going to give you the tutorial now. You'll figure it out. But
yeah, it's okay. You can.
Cool.
Yeah, if you want, you can just.
Awesome.
I can post on YouTube anyway. So
thanks for joining, Alex. We'll be in touch.
Cheers. Thanks.
Cool. We'll do some Q&A. Let's see. Shachar Ziv asks, Adar, what do you think of the idea of co-resistance? On the one hand, it's great. And on the other hand, I've heard about it in the context of not speaking publicly with Israelis who are not co-resisting in advance. So, I mean, I think the concept's great. I think it's good to build broad alliances in order to achieve political goals. I do think the anti-normalization movement in Palestinian society sometimes is a detriment to co-resistance. So there's many different versions of anti-normalization, call it a spectrum. Some will say you can talk to Israelis, you can even work for them, but you can't be their friends. Others will say no contact with Israelis. Some will say you can't have day-to-day interactions, but if you want to meet and negotiate a solution, you could do that. And some will say no contact whatsoever. So it's not normalizing ties with your enemy. And I think that it's a mistake because some level of a normalization is good, primarily in the form of talking to one another, even if it's friendships, because the second you have a friend on the other side, you instantly care about their well-being. It's very easy to support policies that collectively punish people you don't know. But once you begin to know them personally, you begin to think twice about policies that may harm them. So the more cross-border relationships we have, whether it's working relationships, friendships, or just meeting to negotiate, I think it's ultimately beneficial. What I will say is I do understand that we shouldn't pretend like it's kumbaya and there's no problems. If you have a friend, if you're a Palestinian and has an Israeli friend, I think it's okay to, you don't need to ignore the conflict. You should talk about it and make sure they understand the suffering of your people and how the Israeli state is contributing to that suffering. So as long as you're doing that, I don't think I see no issue with normalizing on those terms. Emperor Ghidorah says, in the future, do you think that the idea of Israel paying reparations to Palestinians could become a necessity for the peace process due to the overwhelming one-sided violence of the current Gaza operation? I don't want to say necessity, but I think it would probably help, and I think it is part of a just solution, is reparations to those harmed from Israeli aggression, for sure. I don't think there's ever been an example where reparations were paid to the offspring of victims or to the descendants of victims, right? So I don't know if we need to, that's an interesting precedent to set, but those who have been harmed by Israel, then I think that makes perfect sense. So Luddy Von B says, not so fast with medieval cultures. And this in reference to me saying humans are good and they should be protected and stuff like that. And you're saying, not so fast with medieval cultures. So this is a very classic argument of the colonizer, believe it or not. It still propagates our Western societies. So your name's Luddy Von Beat. It sounds like a colonizer name. But I see your thing. You're some kind of a musician, so that's where the Von Beat comes from. So if there's a culture that you view as medieval or primitive, and you're concerned about mass immigration of people from that culture to your country, I think that's legit. People should have a right to determine who immigrates and how to their country. That should be a collective decision of members of a neighborhood or of a state. They should have that right. I think generally immigration could work based on merit. It shouldn't, I don't know if it makes sense to do it based on nationality, ethnicity, or race. That just seems weird. But the best immigration policy is, let people pass a test in order to immigrate. But if you want to focus on cultures you think are not compatible with your culture in order to determine immigration policy, I can see that. But if you're talking about a culture being medieval as a justification to cause them harm, that is not an acceptable thing to do. That is the argument of the colonizer. They justified killing millions of people because we are sophisticated. We are bringing them technology and modernity. Right? The same way now in Gaza, we've killed 5% of the civilian population. But we've done it with these pilots who went to school and learned, and we use this technology, and drones behind computer screens are killing people, and righteous soldiers, not barbarians coming through and yelling Allahu Akbar, right? So there's a framing that is somehow morally better, but it's not. You can't kill 5% of a civilian population and think you somehow have the moral high ground. And the fact that you have better tech does not mean you're morally superior. The Nazis were more technologically advanced than most cultures in the world. They were leading the world in science. Is it okay to just kill medieval cultures? So it really depends what you're talking about. If it's to determine immigration policy, I'd say you could have that conversation. If it's to justify the mass killing of civilians, think about Hamas and how much you hate them. If you're justifying what Israel's doing in Gaza, look in the mirror. You're not better than Hamas. If you were born in Gaza, you would be supportive of Hamas with the psyche you currently have. Let's see. Galactic Guy says, Adar, can you give your opinion on Einat Wilf? I've been listening to her recently. Are you familiar with her philosophy, and what are your thoughts on her in general? So I have not consumed too much of Einat's content. From what I've seen, I guess the main critique is she's either coined or popularized the term Palestinianism, and it's this ideology that will reject Israel no matter what. And I think there's a flaw in that line of thinking. Palestinians are not unique in their rejection of Israel. All populations that got conquered and colonized by a foreign population, and the fact that we're indigenous returning, irrelevant to the dynamic. People who watch the stream already know what I'm going to say, but when people hear this, they're like, wait a minute, but we were here, so it's okay. It's not even talking about okay, not okay. The dynamic of one population coming en masse to a land, claiming it for their own, displacing the local population and replacing them. This has happened hundreds of times throughout history. Every single time it was met with rejection. We don't need a special term like Palestinianism to explain this rejection. It doesn't require a special term. So I strongly disagree with, I think she has a fundamental misunderstanding of a certain dynamic which leads to rejection, which caused her to think that there's a special term that's needed. But this is a very human reaction they're having to their circumstances. So the solution is not to coin a term and say they need to get over Palestinianism. It's also problematic creating a term or using a term that's a pejorative that happens to be also the national and ethnic identity of a people, right? But it's also not a helpful term. You could make that case in much easier sense. It's saying, look, I understand that it's been very hard for Palestinians to accept our existence here. But Palestinians are going to need to come to terms with the fact that we live here, and we are going to prioritize our security. You're not going to expect us to let ourselves be killed on this land, and you can't expect us to leave. But that doesn't mean we don't recognize your humanity. We don't recognize the suffering we've caused you. And we are willing to work with you and find a just solution to this conflict. There's a way to do it. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna take effort, but it's possible. But framing it as the ideology of Palestinianism is why we don't have peace, it's demonizing them and blaming them for having a very human reaction to the conditions that they're in. So that would be my main critique of her based on the limited content of hers I consumed. If there's a video or another claim you'd like me to address, send it over and I'll check it out. But I'd also like to speak to her. I mean, she's definitely an intelligent woman. I think we'd have a great conversation. And yeah, maybe we'll Scott, I don't know if you're watching this, but Scott now does outreach for us. I'm going to send him a message. Actually, I'll write it down. Okay, not well. Let's do it. Okay, cool. Next. Luddy Von Beat says, but October 7th would repeat itself if not any kind of intervention. The question is, what kind of response would be right? Yeah, I think there's probably endless different responses. One is negotiating long-term peace is probably the best way to avoid another October 7th. Take away people's reason to be fighting in the first place. Remove the cause of violence. And no, it's not they're just Muslim and they want to kill us. No, there's a national and ethnic conflict that's unresolved, and they're going to continue to resist until they get their political rights in one way or another. That doesn't mean they're going to get all the demands they're requesting, but we need to negotiate some kind of a solution. But let's say you feel like you can't negotiate with them or not now, and you need to wait a generation. You could prevent another October 7th with better security. You literally could learn from the failures of October 7th and say, you know what? We're not going to go into Gaza because we understand that we can't defeat Hamas. They're hiding under Gaza while their civilians have nowhere to go. We don't want to kill our hostages. We don't want to damage our reputation in the international community. We don't want to send our soldiers to die. We do not have a military solution to defeat Hamas. We're going to negotiate the release of our hostages, and we are going to make sure that something like this can never happen again through much better security. And then we're going to play the long game and work to get Hamas out of power by working with the international community. It might take some concessions on our part, like recognizing the Palestinian state. But the idea that October 7th needs to be dealt with by just mass bombardment, it's a record level bombardment per square kilometer ever. And this is on a densely populated city that did not have proper evacuations while Hamas has where to hide. It's a completely barbaric strategy, right? Like you mentioned medieval culture, but this is one of the most barbaric things that you could do, to not evacuate civilians while the people you claim to be targeting are hiding and just mass bomb the city. It's fucked up. It's why we've had the highest rate of children violently killed since the Rwanda genocide. Rwanda was much worse, but there's nothing in the 21st century that was this deadly for children relative to population size. And again, I gave one. Israel went down an extreme approach, an extremely violent approach. I call it an extreme approach to the path of nonviolence. In between those two paths, there's near infinite variations of things that could have been done that would have been better than what Israel did. See, we got a super chat. Emperor Ghidorah, thank you. Emperor Ghidorah, thanks for the $5. Can you react to a clip of Vegan Gains answering my question of why he loves Israel so much? Did you watch the last clip of him talking about CCR? So there were the clips you sent me 2 weeks ago where you asked him about me, and then he reviewed my video. I reviewed that and did a debunking. So if that's what you're asking, that I reviewed, and I'll upload that on its own as a standalone video, so you could send it to him if you want. But did he do something new on CCR? That's one. And two, you're saying there's a new clip. If there's a new clip, I'm happy to review that, and maybe we could add that to the debunking as well. Thanks for the super chat. Lottie Von Beat says, turn your other cheek. That is your choice. I mean, Jesus comes from this land, my guy, you know. This land creates those who turn the other cheek. And it also creates those who do not turn the other cheek. So we have a lot of extremes on both sides here. But I don't think I said turn the other cheek. I said there are things we could do. It's not just up, you got us, it's over. No, there's things there's increase in sanctions, there's international pressure. I mean, we had the sympathy of the world for a few days until we started our bombardments. And if you do want to engage militarily, fine, do proper evacuations. Don't dismantle their healthcare system. Don't dismantle their water systems. Don't create large swaths of Gaza that are no-go zones where you just shoot anyone on sight. Don't engage with the same level of proportionality where you're killing members of Hamas in their homes with their entire family and with their neighbors, including members of the political bureau. This is all a choice. None of this is necessary. You could engage militarily and do none of this. All of this is not only amounts to a war crime, but is morally indefensible. So there's a lot you could do militarily. I did take the other extreme, but if you want to go down the military path, I could talk for the next hour about things Israel did that they shouldn't do if you have any care whatsoever about civilian well-being. Oh, I see we have Hi Rex, what, you want to hop on? Good to see you. It's been a while. I'll think about it. Maxim saying, Adar, I don't know if this is specifically Einat's conception of Palestinianism, but there's a conception using the term that argues the Palestinian national identity exists purely as a response by Arabs who lived in the land to combat Zionism. So rather than focusing on the understandable and legitimate reaction to millions of Jews establishing a nation in the land, it focused on the invention of the Arab Palestinian identity, especially targeting the Soviets and Arafat as the source of Palestinian national identity. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that from Einat, but that people do focus on how the identity is contrived and not real and invented by the KGB. Yeah, that's, in my opinion, is all a distraction from real human dynamics that cause people to hate each other. Hi Rex, I'll bring you on, but we've given you a lot of floor time to promote Islamophobia and eugenics, so we're not going to do that now. If you want to come with a unique argument, then I'm happy to entertain you. Okay, and if you go on these hateful rants, that's not what we're here to do. And we're going to do 5 minutes because there's some more Q&A, and then we're going to wrap it up. Welcome, Hyrax. Good to see you again. I'm not hearing you. Hold on. Yeah, I can't hear you for some reason. Hyrax? I would leave and come back. I'm not hearing you. Sorry. Vosh Hate Wash Church says most reasonable people agree that Palestinian nationalism started around 1917 before the Soviets existed. Yeah, and some would say even prior to that. Palestinian nationalism certainly strengthened in response to Zionism. That's not at all unusual. People often band together to fight greater external forces. Rest assured, if there's ever an alien invasion, Israelis and Palestinians will fight side by side against the alien invasion, right? And we might create a new shared identity for that fight. But so it's understandable why it would strengthen as a response to Zionism, but it was also part of a greater global trend of national movements all over the world. So it makes sense, that it exists. And even if it was created solely as a response to Zionism, that wouldn't really change anything. So what? Our national identity was very much created by those who hated us. Not created, right? We lived on the land in the past, but European Zionism was born out of oppression. It was an effort to create a unified Jewish people that can all move to Israel. People who didn't speak the same language and didn't have the same culture. Yeah, they had the same religion, but they were different in many ways. Create this unified. It strengthened this unified identity in order to achieve Zionism. That's very natural. There's nothing wrong with that. Shacha says there's another issue with Einat. She believes a minimum condition for moving forward is for Palestinians to acknowledge the Jews' equal and just right for self-determination in part of the land, and for them to give up the right of return in advance to negotiation. Yeah, that's an odd one. I don't see why right of return is so controversial. It seems like there's pretty reasonable ways to do that. If there's a Palestinian state, let them determine the immigration policy of their state, and I think we can also allow for some number of Palestinians making an aliyah of sorts, moving to Israel every year. It doesn't mean millions, because you can't absorb millions of people reasonably. A few tens of thousands every year. There's definitely a way to negotiate rate of return. I don't know why it freaks people out. It freaks people out because it kind of triggers the most primal part of us, that's like demographic losing demographic control. Nothing that scares the shit out of many of us. So, Hyrex will bring you back.
Can you hear me?
There we go. What's up?
Hello. Hello. How is it living in your echo chamber? I mean,
You'd think
I'd like to talk about your opinions on Swada and the Druze.
You'd think, Hyrex, if I was interested in an echo chamber, why would I repeatedly bring on someone like you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you should look at the comments. If you look at the percentage of the demographics of your audience, if you look at the YouTube comments, it's overwhelmingly anti-Zionists and Muslims that are very anti-Israel. I'm not saying specifically that you might not debate this and that, but the vast majority of your followers.
I actually don't think that's true. I think there's a significant number who are Jewish. But
Jewish anti-Zionists.
But wait, but this also doesn't really matter, because your followers doesn't determine if you're existing in an echo chamber. It's who you're willing to have conversations with. But we can move on.
Yes or no? When you see 100 comments kind of filleting you with the same kind of, yes, this is, you have the right opinion on such and such a matter, it does get to you.
So your opinion is that I get generally more praise than I get critique?
Well, you get praise for the kind of anti-Zionist statements you make, whereas, if you go... It's dependent on the audience that you gather. If you go to, say, Joseph Cohen with the Israel Advocacy Group, most of the comments agree with him. And if you go to Nick Fuentes, most of the comments will agree with him, because that's the audience that they gather.
Sure, but
so you have gathered a very anti-Zionist audience. But that's just a fact.
That doesn't speak to whether it's an echo chamber or not. For every comment,
it does to a certain extent.
No, it actually doesn't to no extent at all. For every comment I get praising me, I probably get 5 critiquing me, calling me out, or hating on me. It's not that I don't live in a bubble where I don't get critique for my views, where I refuse to engage with those who have differences of opinions. In fact, if anyone wants to go through the live streams, you'll see I host a wide array of different people, from far-right settlers to anti-Zionists to people like you. In fact, I've never turned down a conversation with anybody in the history of my life. So to come on here with just such a false statement, I thought you'd come with a little more accuracy this time around.
All right, well, maybe I'm wrong about your guests. I stand corrected, but if you please go ahead and look again at the kind of comments on YouTube and the comments on here, the majority are more or less supportive of against the existence of Israel, more or less.
Let's see. In this chat, we have in the Discord. Probably.
I mean, this is just 10 people. This is totally.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Again, it's not important. The Discord you're in is actually quite diverse. There's a lot of Jews, a lot of Israelis, fair bit of Palestinians, fair bit of anti-Zionists, some religious Jews. It's a mix. It's impossible to build a perfect demographic breakdown. And my views very well might be attracting some people over others, without a doubt, but that's unavoidable. The only way that it's unavoidable. If I could completely change my content and then attract a different crowd, but I don't. This is just not. It's just a non-issue. People should be able to talk about whatever they want, and they're going to get certain followings. It says nothing to if they're existing in an echo chamber, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. But anyways, what's on your mind besides that?
I want to ask you something. You live in Kfar Radim, right? You live in a nice middle-class neighborhood. You come from a nice middle-class family. You haven't really suffered in your life, right?
I live in.
You've lived in a.
I live in a
fairly wealthy.
Upper
middle-class background.
No, that's not true. No, that's not true.
All right. Well, that's the circles you exist in today.
Okay, fair. I've worked to be in the circles I'm in.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I didn't, but here's the thing. I want to be very clear about my privilege. I didn't grow up poor. No, I grew up in middle class. Definitely not upper middle class. I grew up middle class. Never suffered. That's definitely not true. Everybody, even very wealthy people, have their fair share of struggles. I've definitely struggled in many ways, Ways that I often don't
Um,
share here online, but my life has not been as easy as I put on. But I don't think I'm a victim. I don't think I'm as we say in Hebrew, misken. No, all in all, I'm
Right.
grateful for what I have, and I recognize how privileged I am, and I love my life. But yeah,
But you love. When I say an echo chamber, you don't seem to understand what I really mean. I mean, you. What I want to know is, you said you would be happy for a right of return to happen, and for you to live exactly where you live, and for you to continue living your existence with all your, and for all your, for all the criticism of Israel, you have much more freedom in Israel today than you do in, say, Serbia or in Hungary, to critique the government. And you have the freedom to be whatever, to be gay. You have the freedom to be trans. You have the freedom to you can go to Tel Aviv and to try to evangelize people to come to Christianity. You can't do that in Jerusalem, but you have the freedom, the right to do that in the quasi-city-state of Tel Aviv. Now, if there was a Muslim majority, effectively, would you still have these freedoms, and would you still hold the opinions that you hold, or are you being a little bit naive from a vantage point of privilege that you have at the moment without realizing the consequences that might come about?
Wait, I think there might be a misunderstanding about my position. Where did I propose the situation where the result of that would be us being a minority, where we couldn't determine social issues in the country we're living in? I've never in my
but
whole.
Essentially, this is what there are many more Palestinian so-called refugees than there are Israeli Jews.
But no, but
this is effectively what would happen.
But that wasn't my position. I said there's reasonable ways to achieve right of return. If we're talking about two states, then Palestine can determine their immigration policy, and Israel can also find a way to do right of return that doesn't create societal concerns for Jewish Israelis, and that allows us to absorb a reasonable number of people. So every single year, around 30,000 Jews make Aliyah. I don't know what Israel's maximum reasonable absorption rate would be, but imagine if the policy was every year you could have 30,000 Jews and 30,000 Palestinians make Aliyah. If more than 30,000 Palestinians want to make Aliyah and become Israeli citizens, they would just need to be on a waiting list, and then they could come in the following year. That's not creating a demographic concern. That's allowing for equal amount of immigration from both sides.
This is the Adal Weinraub conception of rights of return, but the Palestinians want they want to take back all of Ashdod or Isdud. They want to take back Beisan, Bet She'an. They want to take back all these places, and they want to engage in expulsion. The majority, expulsion of Jews. By the way, Adal, I don't think that you understand that. First of all, most Palestinians do not understand that the Jews that came, whose parents or grandparents came from Arab countries, by and large, I would say 80-90%, they hate them a lot more than Ashkenazi Jews. However, the majority of Arabs and Palestinians, they hate you a lot more than they do. They believe that you're an alien presence that needs to be totally expelled. They believe that you are Khazarian convert, and they do not see you as having any future in so-called Palestine. This is the consensus. Now, how is it possible to reconcile such an ideology? It simply isn't.
Oh, it's very easy to reconcile such an ideology by understanding a few things. First of all, you said their conception of right of return is XYZ, mine is ABC. When people negotiate, it's a well-known negotiation tactic. Palestinians are good negotiators. You come with an extreme stance in order to meet in the middle. This is what they do at the shuk. This is shuk culture, okay? This is well known. You don't, very rarely do you come to a negotiation and your first demand is what you would ultimately be willing to agree to. So I just don't accept this whole thing, the whole narrative that, oh, they say this, therefore that's certainly what they mean. Absolutely not. Number two is, if you judge people's sentiment about their enemy while they're engaged in a conflict, it's not going to be good. The majority of Palestinians would like to expel Jews living on the land, the same way the majority of Jewish Israelis today support expelling Palestinians from the land. This makes sense.
No, objection. This isn't true. Majority of the people who don't vote for the current government do not want total expulsion.
That's not, hold on. There's been multiple polls since October 7th, and it does show a majority support some form of ethnic cleansing out of Gaza, and many would also support ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. It's over 50% of Jewish Israelis currently, but that shouldn't even be surprising. We've been in conflict for so long. Why wouldn't you want your enemy to leave? If anything, it's a more just solution than needing to kill them. Just go, get out of here. You've caused me so much problems. Leave. Wanting your enemy to go makes perfect sense. We shouldn't look at it as some extreme view that is hard to figure out how anybody could possibly arrive at such a view. No, it's a very reasonable view if you're in conflict. The solution is to get out of the conflict and recognize that it's a non-starter. Neither population is leaving, but we could negotiate a just solution that requires both people stay on the land. Let's find what that solution is. That's tenable. That's within the realm of possible. That's what we need to work towards.
Well, not really. I mean, what percentage you want a one-state solution like Gideon Levy, like Avram Borg? What percentage of Israelis want this? 0.5%. Very, very few people. This is never.
But why do you say why do you say I'm promoting a one-state solution? That's literally never been my.
Because you explicitly said that before. You said that in the previous conversation.
When?
What do you mean? But you're on record. I'm not going to go into it. You said you support two states, one state solution with the right of return. So
no. You're my guy. My guy. Hyrex, you're hallucinating.
This is what you said.
Look,
I mean,
okay.
I can't change.
It's funny because I'm sure the regular viewers are cracking up because I've made my position on the solution.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. Effectively, it's the same thing if you support right of return, because it will mean there'll be a majority of Muslims or Arabs.
How does that mean that they
can form their own? They can vote Hamas into the Knesset and do whatever they want. So it doesn't have to be Hamas. It doesn't have to be Hamas. It could be whatever party.
So Hyrex, I'm going to give you a challenge that I want you to come next stream with an answer to. I want you to show me a population growth chart that takes into account natural population growth in Israel amongst the different demographics, takes into account 30,000 Jewish new immigrants a year and 30,000 Palestinian immigrants a year, and at what year you get to the point where Jews are a minority. I want you to show that graph.
Look, majority of Israelis don't even want this, and the vast majority of the Palestinians don't want this. Second of all, I don't think that you really grasp the level of their hatred towards you. It is profound and existential. The day will not come until the Jew hides behind the Gharqad tree. This is what the majority of them believe. There is a fundamental civilizational difference between us. And what you did last time, you said, well, there are bad passages in the Talmud and in the Tanakh and whatever. And I said, yes, well, I personally am not a religious person, but I said to you, there is a fundamental civilizational difference because like 90% of Jewish Israelis don't have a literalist interpretation of the majority of these unsavory elements. However, the vast majority of the Ummah do. And then you were mocking me for saying, oh, there were polls from 2013 that said X, Y, Z about executing apostates, about executing the blasphemers and treatment of homosexuals. Well, this is pretty much current. It hasn't actually changed. And you said that Muslims have the capacity to evolve just like everybody else. Well, I mean, the facts sort of speak for themselves. If you look at Syria, we see how they have gone backwards. If you look at the entirety of the Muslim world, you will see in terms of the percentage of women wearing the hijab, the niqab, and so on, we see a backslide into medievalism. So, furthermore, I would really like to know your opinion on on the events in Sweden, and I would also like to say, if we enact
wait,
return,
Hyrax, I do want to respond to
a full right of return. You can respond. I want to say another point. If we enact a full right of return, then the fate of the Jews will be the same as the fate that is befalling the Alawites and the Druze in the new Umayyad Caliphate under al-Julani, because they will see us with much vengeance and enmity, and they will
okay, but Hyrax,
a bloodbath that hasn't been seen since the days of the Mongols. This is what they said in 1948. They weren't able to actualize it, but they certainly will do if we allow them to. That's
Hyrax,
truly what they want. I said my piece.
Yeah, your last part was a straw man, because I already made it very clear that's not what I'm suggesting. I understand Jewish concern with security, and I recognize that in order for us to be safe, we need institutions to keep us safe, and I recognize that that is much easier to achieve if we're a majority. I understand the grave concern Jews have with becoming a minority on this land when they could no longer control their destiny, and I don't think it makes any sense to even propose solutions where that is a high likelihood of happening, because, or even a relatively low likelihood of happening, because I know it'll be outright rejected and put Jews in danger. So that's just not an argument that I've ever made. So there's really no point in bringing that up. In terms of your views on Muslims, I mean, again, we've had this conversation, so I don't want to go deep into it, but I live in the Galilee. 50% of the people who live in the Galilee are Palestinian/Arab, depending on how they identify. The majority of them happen to be Muslim. Some are Druze, some are Christian. They're all culturally different. We all get along. We're living together in peace. They're some of the warmest, most hospitable people I've ever met. There are Muslims that today, there's certain neighborhoods in the West Bank that if I go into, I very well may be lynched. I recognize that. I'm very well aware that many hate us. But when I look at the vast landscape of Muslims, I see a vast difference in how they view the world, in their level of extremism, in their beliefs about violence. I see that we currently have peace with the majority of our Muslim neighbors. We've had a soft peace with.
It's an illusion. It's an illusion. I'm sorry. Under Assad, there was stability between the various ethnic groups. However, underneath the surface, there was profound and existential simmering hatred. It goes back to the Middle Ages. And
again, Hyrax, it's my turn to speak, okay? And we've had this conversation, so I know what you're going to say. You're going to say the fact that we have peace with most of our neighbors, they're just lying one day that they will attack us. Well, I think generally there's more to gain from peace than there is from war, and that's why we see not just Jordan and Egypt wanting long-term peace with us, but also UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco now normalize ties with us. We see Saudi Arabia also open to it, given certain concessions that we make. And yes, even in Syria, they have not yet achieved stability. We shouldn't have expected them to achieve stability so quickly, and it might end in a greater disaster than what we're already seeing. We currently have Syria is run by an Al-Qaeda leader who wants to normalize ties with Israel. We have seen.
I don't.
What? Al-Julani.
I think it's a bad idea.
Oh no, that's fine. I'm just telling you. And literally, Al-Qaeda leader is just another example of a terrorist turned statesman. That would make him the last, not the last, but the newest of many. The PLO used to be more extreme than. Wait, hold on. I'm not done. The PLO was at war, was more extreme than Hamas. We've now had security coordination with the PLO for decades. They recognize their right to exist in 93. Okay, we had an example where in Northern Ireland, where the IRA, they said they will not agree to any solution that still has British people in Northern Ireland. They made concessions. We had Nelson Mandela singing "Kill all the Boers," only to be a great peacemaker. The world is filled with terrorists turned statesmen. It's pretty much the only constant, that people change given changing conditions. Now, I also want to focus on some more data. You talk about how Muslims are so backwards and so murderous. If you look at the top 10 highest murder rates in the world, 9 of them are Christian. And the one that's not Christian is half Christian, half Muslim, Nigeria.
Not European Christians.
No, okay, but it's not Islam, you see. So
it's also Islam. It's a combination.
No. Wait, hold on. But my point is that there's so much beyond religion that determines people's belief, their culture, and how they act. And to just say, if you're Muslim, therefore you believe this, or therefore you act like this, it's just such a simplistic way to view the world. Will always lead you to bad conclusions.
Alex,
it's just always going to lead you to wrong conclusions. We need to understand that so much of human belief and human behavior, before people are Muslim, before they're Palestinian, before we're Jewish or Israeli, we're human, and we respond to our surroundings, generally speaking, more or less how humans do, not how Muslims do. So if we recognize that, we understand that anything is possible in terms of building a peaceful and prosperous world for all people. To think that if you're Muslim, therefore we can have peace with you, not only is that a very sad worldview, there's no solution besides continued death and destruction for eternity. So no, I think your worldview is not only depressing, it's inaccurate, and doesn't lead us to any good conclusions.
I mean, okay, first of all, can I just quickly respond to this nonsense that Alex P is saying Indonesia is a peaceful... Okay, no. Indonesia is currently engaged in a genocide of the indigenous West Papuans, partly because they are not Muslim, okay? Furthermore, Indonesia is a Muslim country that is on the surface secular, but it truly isn't. Okay, there is a region in Indonesia called Maluku, and in the 1960s, they had an independent republic called the Republic of South Maluku. The majority of them were Christians, and the dominant Javanese Muslims defeated them in a war. And what they are doing today, or have been doing since the 1960s, is they bring in a lot of people from the center and the west of Indonesia that are Muslims to essentially colonize the eastern parts, not just in West Papua, but places like Maluku and other places like that, to have a Muslim majority. They do not want to have uprisings by Christians or by other ethnic minorities that oppose their rule. Now, yes, on Bali, the Hindus are rather indifferent. However, in the eastern parts of Indonesia, there is great resentment underneath the surface in Maluku, and there is an active war going on that nobody talks about, where they have been brutalizing the native black people in West Papua. And part of that is religiously motivated as well as ethnically motivated, okay? So there is something uniquely virulent and uniquely violent about the religion of Islam, okay? And I cannot accept what you are saying. Not all cultures are civilizationally equal. This is simply untrue, okay? You have to say these things in polite society. You have to say these things in modern academia and leftist discourse. But again, but if you simply look at the passages of the Quran, strike the disbelievers wherever you find them, okay? Are you going to find such a passage in Buddhism? Now, you're going to say, well, look at the Myanmar government, look at the government of Sri Lanka.
Hyrax.
That's the actual government. You will not find anywhere in Buddhism that justifies such
I'm not going to talk over you, so I server muted you. I told you before you came on, I'm not letting you do these Islamophobic rants because I've given you already 2 occasions to do that. And while I'm happy to talk to anybody, I'm not here to give people a platform so they could just spew hate. I wouldn't let somebody do it with anti-Semitism. I wouldn't let somebody do it with racism. You're not coming with new material. You've said this before. People could watch your 2 prior episodes. They're there. But that's not what this platform is all about. So I'm going to limit how much airtime you have if you're just here to spew hate. There's enough hate in the world. We don't need more of it. And what's funny is you have an obsession with Muslim hate, but you yourself are a hateful individual. You are more like the people that you hate than you care to realize. You are, in many ways, the things you dislike in fundamental Islam, you have in yourself. There's a spiritual concept that the things we don't like in others are things we have in ourselves. So maybe that's worth reflecting on. And if you you're not muted forever. If you ever want to come back and talk about new things, you're welcome anytime. But I already told you before you hopped on, you're not going to get free airtime to just spew hate. Go do that on Twitter. The Israeli G says the Kurds and Azerbaijanis largely kind of like Israel. Guess how religious they are. Just watch how their women dress and dance with men and let me know how Muslim they are. Well, yeah, they are Muslim. That's true. And they like Israel. And that also is interesting how we supported Azerbaijan and not Armenia. So we supported Muslims over Christians there. It's just not a good, if the framework in which you try to understand the world is just as simple as Muslim bad, you're constantly going to be led to the worst conclusions. You should never look at any group of people that simplistically. It's the root of so much evil that we have. It's just not going to give you an accurate worldview. It just won't. It's funny how Hyrax goes, I'm not spewing hate, I'm just stating facts. This is actually a common rebuttal that many people don't really recognize how dumb it is. Things can be both true and hateful. Those aren't two contradictory things. If you're walking down the street and you see somebody overweight and you go up to them and say, "You're fat," that's hateful and true. It being true doesn't mean you should say it. In fact, it's true, but you shouldn't say it. Right? You can talk about genetic differences between different races or different ethnic groups, right? That can be done in like a good faith and curious way, but often how it's brought up is just to spread hate. So truth does not determine if it's hateful or not. There's a Buddha quote. Is this a Buddha quote or a Buddhist quote? You were mentioning Buddhism, so this is a good one to know. Before you speak, it should pass 3 gates. The first gate is it true? The second gate is it kind? The third gate is it necessary? Now, the is it necessary is the hardest one. It's like necessary. If you're going to speak as little as possible, then few words are necessary. But I like the first two. Is it true? Is it kind? And you could broach any difficult topic, even on controversial issues, and still be sensitive with how you talk about them. For example, Jews are overrepresented in many positions of power. This creates a lot of concern for non-Jews, and it fuels anti-Semitism. We should be able to have an honest conversation about that, as long as we're not being hateful. The same way, I think it's okay to talk about problems that exist in Islam. That's an okay conversation to have. But again, when you're talking about a group of people and their identity in a way that's deeply triggering, you just need to be more sensitive with how you approach it, because you're definitely not going to. If you have any interest in communicating with the people of the group you have concerns with, you're not going to do that by triggering them. An anti-Semite isn't going to appeal to Jews. An Islamophobe is not going to appeal to Muslims. But if you actually care about building bridges and changing minds, then you should find a way to convey messages in a way that people will be willing to hear. Anyways, we'll do some more Q&A. So you're saying no, the Israeli Jews, you're saying they are barely Muslim, and the only Muslims who dare to fight jihad, their women dance with men. That's haram according to pretty much all Muslims. No, but you're actually proving my point. You're proving my point that Islam is only part of one's identity, and culture supersedes Islam. Because when you look at Kurds, when you look at Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, they're all different from one another. They're not all the same, even though they have the same religion. It's just way too simplistic of a framework to understand people and how they view the world and how they respond to their environment. Now, I will go on to say the Israeli G, but let's look at the UAE. They're very Muslim. But we could fly to Dubai, and we have trade with Dubai, or we have trade with the UAE. Even Saudi Arabia is open to normalizing ties with us. An Al-Qaeda leader is open to normalizing ties with us. Very different types of Muslims across the border open to ties with us. Interesting. Interesting. It's almost as if your religious belief is not as deterministic to who you are as many would like it to seem. Yeah, Irina has a good point. Palestinians are actually pretty secular. I've been to Ramallah bars a lot, one with a swimming pool inside. Palestinian women in bikinis and drinking. Interesting. I was going to go to Ramallah next weekend. You should send me. I'd be interested in checking that out. Yeah. I haven't done the Ramallah nightlife yet, but I hear it's pretty poppin'. And yeah, I have a lot of Palestinian friends, and are they as open as my crew from LA? No, but there's definitely more secular than a lot of places in the Middle East. Yeah, Hyrex, I'm happy to unmute you, but we're just not going to do the monologues, okay? You're back. Welcome back.
All right. Look, I mean, I fundamentally disagree with your position, but I mean, it's kind of like there's no point. You know, you're not going to change your opinion. I'm not going to change mine. I mean, however, I don't know if you realize that what they will say to your face in Ramallah is what they say, the same as what they say amongst themselves. By the way, I spoke with an individual from Ramallah presenting as secular on some application, language exchange app, and the issue of gays briefly came up about Mohammed Al-Kurd, who is most likely part of the LGBT community, and he said many of them hate him simply because he's gay. And I said to him, and I asked him, well, do you believe that he should be killed? And he said, well, I didn't decide this. It says this in the Quran and in the Torah. And I didn't say anything. But this is a very, very common perception among a lot of them. And it might be, and this is something a lot of progressives like you don't want to mention because it doesn't fit your narrative or your agenda. Furthermore,
wait, hold on. Okay, you keep trying to put me in this box and misinterpret.
I mean, this is my own experience.
Wait.
My lived experience.
No. Hold on. Wait. No. You say progressives like you. First of all, I don't identify as a progressive, but I have no. I'm aware of how the majority of the Muslim world view gays. I don't have any. I'm not naive to that fact. What's the point? I'm well aware. I just don't. If somebody has social views that you disagree with, or social views even that you think are abhorrent, what does that say? That you should kill them? No. Okay. So if there's people,
I don't. Yes, but it says you shouldn't want to live with them, or you should want to live with as few of them as possible. I think it's normal to not want to live with somebody who might want to kill somebody, say a family member of yours that might be gay. I don't want to live with them. Okay. I think it's sane. And it's a matter of self-preservation. It's not a matter of hatred.
Okay. So right now in Israeli society, we're 20% Arab/Palestinian, and the greatest force fighting progression of LGBT rights is the ultra-Orthodox community, not the Arab community. What will I say though? If we now have 50% of the population is Palestinian, will that be bad for social issues in Israel? Social issues, at least as I would like them to be? For sure, I acknowledge that. But I also didn't propose a plan that would create that demographic concern. So I don't see the issue.
This is disingenuous.
Why?
To compare the ultra-Orthodox The ultra-Orthodox, until there is a Sanhedrin, do not believe that anything should be done to any gays, okay? There was a gay man in Nablus or Jenin that was beheaded, okay? And that is acceptable for many
Wait,
of
but
them.
I don't.
When there was
but,
this crazy...
Wait, Hyrax. What are we talking about? Well, how is that
Okay.
relevant? I am aware that
They are far more extreme than us. That's what I'm
okay,
saying.
yeah, fair. And but you know who amongst them are the most like us? The ones who are living here with us, because that's cultures morph into each other and we influence one another. But again, I don't even see the point. There's the gay Palestinians come to Israel as refugees. I'm aware of that. I just don't know what's the relevance.
The relevance is that, first of all, it brings me back to my previous point of the doctrinal literalism. Even the vast majority of Israeli Jews have undergone a process of evolution over the last 2,000 years, whereby they will never be in a situation where they think it is acceptable to execute or even arrest somebody who is gay, apart from a very small minority of
No.
extremists.
Hyrax. Again, I don't. What's your point that the Muslim world doesn't like gays?
My point is that
Okay.
by allowing millions of people who live in camps in Lebanon and in Jordan and God knows
No,
where.
Hyrax. If you're going to keep strawmanning me, we're not going to do this. I made my position very clear. I gave a very sensible immigration policy for right of return that is not millions of people from refugee camps moving to Israel. So stop strawmanning. If you want to have this argument, find somebody who actually believes this. You're not going to come and take airtime and attack a straw man. It's a waste of everybody's time. That's not my position. It's not my position.
I understand this is your position.
No. It's not. No. Hyrax. It's not my position, and I've made it clear to you 3 times it's not my position, and you can't get over right of return. And I think the reason is it's just you just can't get over hating on Muslims. So you wanted to come back on after you went on an Islamophobic monologue. You said you want to come on to ask a question, and now you're just obsessing over the fact that.
Okay, can I ask a question? Are you aware? Are you aware of Arafat's Johannesburg speech in 1994, in which he said the struggle will not be complete until we have all of Palestine, and that this is just a phase, or the Oslo Accords were just a phase of reclaiming all of so-called historical Palestine, and that it was merely a hudna. Are you aware of this?
I'm aware.
So what is your opinion on this matter? Do you not think that they aren't just using it as a tactic, and supposing we come to some kind of agreement?
No, I know. I don't think if Palestinians have a sovereign state and a peace deal in place that they're going to ruin that and go back to a life of war where they will continue to be the weaker side if they have a just solution. No, I don't think they're going to do that. We've never given them that opportunity. And to think that once they have sovereignty, once they have freedom, that they're going to decide, instead of building economic ties with us and cooperation with us and freedom of movement, so they could visit their family members in Israel proper and visit some holy sites that might be in Israel proper and see the ocean. And this is, again, in a 2-state paradigm, which is what this quote is in the context of. I don't think there's any reason that they're going to destroy all that and wage war against a much more powerful army. No, I don't think so.
If
they do, well, we'll still be strong.
Are you prepared to take this risk?
Yes, of course. Why?
I am not.
Why?
The vast majority of Israelis.
Because Palestinians living under the boot of Israelis is immoral and unsustainable. It will always lead to more violence. So I'm willing to take risk to give them their freedom. And if we then have war, then we will need to deal with that war. And yes, me and my family will take the risk. But our destiny is not to live on this land. Our destiny is not to live on this land while oppressing another population. It's not. That's not what we're meant to do. And you have no solution whatsoever besides oppression forever or ethnic cleansing. That's all you're bringing to the table. Neither of those are acceptable. The same way I wouldn't accept that to our people, it's not acceptable to do that to another people. So yeah, if we go towards one state in the form of a federation, there's risk that comes with that. If we go towards two states, there's risk with that. And if we maintain the status quo, as we see, there's certainly risk with the status quo. So I would rather. You don't.
Solution.
There's many solutions. We just don't have all too much of an interest in getting there. We'd rather maintain an immoral and unsustainable status quo, which will always lead to more violence. People don't accept.
Let me ask you. Supposing you're right, Adar, do you think there's a plurality of Palestinians that would be willing to accept the Adar Weinrab peace proposal? Because I'm not aware of that being the case. So, because in order for there to be an agreement, you need another side to agree to it. Furthermore, you need a majority of Israelis. If you truly believe in democracy, would you be prepared to say have a referendum on such an agreement? Because that certainly won't pass.
No, that's again a straw man. Nothing did I propose. Will there be a referendum on democracy? That's just bullshit.
You don't believe in true democracy.
No, that's literally not. Why is that relevant? First of all, a democracy is not that people can vote on anything.
Brexit had a referendum.
No, wait, hold on. You have a misconception on what a democracy is. And this is why we need a constitution. The constitution protects the right of the people. The people cannot vote to take away those rights. A democracy is not that the collective can decide whatever they want, even if it infringes on the rights of the people. So no, we need a strong constitution that protects the rights of the people. But you keep going back to this demographic concern, which is completely irrelevant to any solution that I've proposed. And with that, I'm going to bring a few more people on, but you could stay on, Hyrax. It's just we have a lot of people here now. We have History Speaks. We have Altoids and Levy. History Speaks, we'll give it to you first. Here, let's.
This guy just has a narrative that's completely immune to data. I mean, like the Muslims are intrinsically like XYZ. Bro, the Pew polls that Sam Harris has made a career off of, these Pew polls, where it's like, oh, this percent, just large majority Afghanistan or Egypt want Islamic law, and with all of the punitive, cruel execution of apostate sword. It also shows like 12% of Turks want Islamic law. Like that's probably lower than the percentage of Israelis, given the number of Haredim there are now. 8% is Azerbaijanis. 10% of Kazakhs want Islamic law. So like your position cannot account. My position, which is the text matters and culture matters, accounts for this diversity. Your position that it's all doomed. We have to hate 2 billion people. That no culture can ever change. It doesn't explain this diversity.
You want to live in
it also doesn't explain. Bro, you talked for like 10 minutes. You do your usual monologue. Also, again, you fail to account for the fact that Christians in these countries, the low rate the Muslims was still in the majority, supported the 7 October attack, according to Poland.
They didn't. That's a total lie. No, it's not true. It's not true.
That's made up. The polling is made up.
Oh my God! Look, if you want the vast majority of Christians,
Bro.
Yes,
I have Coptic relatives in London. I hang out with. Are you saying I know? I know
in London. No. It's not true.
Wait. Hold on. Wait. Matthew, is there?
Going around in circles.
No. Wait. Hold on. Matthew is referencing a poll. Hyrax, are you saying it's not true just because it's hard for you to believe, or do you know that the poll he's referencing is false?
Multiple polls.
I'm saying that you can go. There are many other sources. Okay, if you want to look at, for example, social media reactions from Christians on platforms like X, on platforms like Reddit, you will see that there is a far
okay. So anecdotes. Okay, anecdotes. So you don't like polls? Okay, I get it.
Are Middle Eastern Christians the Middle Eastern Muslims? So it's not saying I don't like that. This particular poll has an agenda, and you're saying no. First of all, it might be that there is no way on earth that the majority of Christians, other than a few extreme communists, that would support such methods. They might not support the existence of Israel. Okay. But it's not even true. A lot of I speak with people, Christians abroad, okay, with Assyrian Christians from Iraq that support Israel. Okay, I am in contact with certain Maronite Christians online, and they are supportive of Israel. You wouldn't
Wait,
find that
Hyrax.
with Muslims.
Hyrax, real quick. You can't negate a poll because of your anecdotal experience, especially when there's a selection bias. The anti-Zionist Christians that you meet are less likely to speak to you. So you're going to speak to the ones that are most open to speaking to a Jew. And that doesn't wait, hold on.
Social media, and you will see.
No. Social media is not always reflective of real life. Social media has a lot of extreme views. It often portrays people in society as way more extreme and sometimes different than they actually are. It's just not, you can't say this poll, I know this poll is false because of some anecdotal experience I have. That's just not a serious way to go about knowing what's true. What you could do, and what I suggest you do, History Speaks can drop the polls, you could review them, try to find a flaw in the methodology, and then come back and explain why these polls are not good, or maybe even look for another poll that has contradictory data. But you can't say these polls are false because I have friends online. That's just ridiculous.
There is polling data that would suggest that, okay, you want to look at Lebanon, for example, the voters of the Lebanese forces are open to some kind of agreement with Israel. Okay, this is simply fact. The open of the Falange party in Lebanon are open to some kind of a memorandum with Israel. Doesn't mean they love Israel, no, but to suggest that they were supportive of October 7th is absurd. The majority of Christians in Lebanon who do not like Israel are Orthodox communists, and some of the Maronites as well, but the majority of the Maronites are open to some kind of arrangement. This is simply fact. Look at what their party leaders say. This is not me. Forget the polls. Look at what the people who hold power say. The people that represent the Christians in Lebanon are open to an agreement. This is fact.
Open to an agreement. Can this guy stop forever?
Wait, also,
they totally condemned October 7th. Totally. Every single.
Al-Julani's also open
Christian
to an agreement.
Leader condemned.
But anyways, yeah, Matthew, the floor is yours now.
Yeah. So there's a poll from the Washington Institute, which is not polling communists, right? It's polling Christians in Lebanon, the large majority of whom, by the way, express a negative view of Hezbollah and are against the war with Israel because they think it's hurting Lebanon. Only 29% Christians like Hezbollah. However, Hamas, Christians have 59% positive, in spite of the fact, this is a Washington Institute, a neoconservative think tank in DC, in spite of the fact that it's obviously has a Muslim Brotherhood root. So like the Christians are going to be ideologically inclined to oppose it, but because they were supportive of what Hamas did in general, they had a positive view they expressed positive view of the organization. And the argument that, they're just intimidated. Well, if they were intimidated, why are they all saying they're anti-Hezbollah, most of them?
Hello?
That's
Why do the majority of their party leaders? There are many public figures, not me, not my friends. Public figures that are not. They're not pro-Israel. They're just open to. They condemn the vast majority of the Lebanese public figures who are Christians condemned Hamas on October 7th. Just because there's some obscure poll doesn't mean. Oh, for God's sake! Look! Isn't it okay? You know what? No. Matthew, listen to me. I will pay you my life savings if you poll every single Lebanese Christian citizen, and they come back.
You made an assertion about the vast majority.
I will pay you my entire life's worth if it comes back true that let me finish. If the majority of Lebanese Christians will agree with the statement, do you support Hamas and their means and methods and modus operandi of fighting? If they say, if it's more than 50%, I will pay you my entire life's worth. But I promise you that is not going to be the case. You cannot take a poll of a few hundred people here and there, okay? The majority, the leaders who represent the Lebanese Christians, the Lebanese forces, Jamil family, the Shamoun family, that doesn't mean they love Israel. They had an alliance with Saddam at a certain point. But they are open to some kind of understanding with Israel. They do not want to have a state of war, and they certainly do not support Islamist savages like Hamas. And for you to suggest that they do is incredibly insulting to them, because they hate them just as much as they hate us. Okay? So you are being disingenuous.
Wait, hold on. Wait.
By the
Rex.
way, Matthew, they hate your people, the Copts, as well. They kidnap Coptic girls and they force them to convert. This has happened to hundreds, if not thousands, of girls, and you will say nothing about that. Absolutely shameful.
And I server muted him again because he can't help but go on these Islamophobic rants. It's deeply programmed.
Well, no, I mean,
but
he's using it as like a talking point. But I've talked about, ironically, on this show, like the issue of like in Upper Egypt, like these, they're both have been elopements, but there also have been like literally cases of sex trafficking, rape, forced marriage of Coptic women. So it's not, just because he's like a demagogue doesn't mean that point should be, dismissed, because it's a very serious point. It's one, frankly, where there needs to be more scholarship on it, because like there clearly have been elopements, there clearly have been, which weren't accepted by the family, and the girl goes back because that's easier. And there clearly have been cases of rape and sex trafficking, and essentially, if you're talking about forced marriage, essentially like sex slavery. So it's not a trivial issue that he's referring to. But it's not to be discussed in the context of like demagoguery. And like we were talking about Lebanon, I don't know why he.
Well, that's the thing.
I just want to underline that that's not made up that he's talking about.
I want to make 2 points. First of all, that's kind of the thing, that he'll jump from one Muslim group to the next. It's just there's a long list of all the things Muslims have ever done wrong, and when you list that, you have a very long list, right? The anti-Semites do it with the Jews as well. Like an articulate anti-Semite will just have a long list of everything the Jews have ever done. That's what you go to every time. Somebody will provide nuance on one of them. It's like, oh, but what about the porn industry? Provide nuance on that. It's like, oh, but what about media? Provide nuance on that. Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, Sam Bankman-Fried. It's just the same playbook. It's the playbook of demonizing groups of people you don't like.
There's also
it's boring. But wait, hold on. One more point, Matthew. When you brought up that the issue with Coptic Christians that are being sold off to slavery, when somebody like you, they're kidnapped. Like
forced marriage.
So when someone like you says that, it's very easy to listen to and trust and believe, because you're not coming from a hateful place, right? And Hyrax, I hope you're listening. You mentioned something very legitimate that people need to talk about, but because you have all this hate, when you say it, it's just seen as just more hate. You're not in a position. No, you're not seen as a legitimate source to talk about this. People aren't listening to you, unless there are people who just agree with you already, but then you're preaching to the choir. But if you have any interest in convincing others, look how Matthew approached it. Matthew can literally raise awareness about the kidnapping of Coptic Christians, and people will listen because he's not a hateful individual. So something to reflect on. Matthew, say, we'll give it to you, and then we're going to give it. Then we're going to give it to Altoids and then Anon.
Yeah. So, but we have to, again, though, we have to say this is a disgusting problem that is evil, rape, forced marriage that has happened at the hands of Salafi Muslims in southern Egypt. That you can't just say, okay, all the Muslim, like Lebanon, there's no issue of Christian women kidnapped by Muslim men. There's no issue of this in Jordan. Like, so you can't just say, and even Egypt, this is a regional problem, like it isn't something like my family would be vulnerable to, right? This is a problem that's based in specific regions of Egypt, poor, which have like also larger rates of extremist Muslims, like Salafis. Like Minya is like I think the focal point of this horror. So, but I don't think the productive approach means someone could say, "Oh, how could you, as you're half Coptic, not hate Muslims with these atrocities?" I just don't think the productive approach is to hate 2 billion people, right? What does that solve? And also there are countries, like you're just talking about Lebanon and you bring up like southern Egypt. You know, it doesn't really follow. So I just don't think it's true. I think the cultural differences are huge. I don't think it's productive, right? So, and I just think like it's adverse to data. It's adverse to my experience with Coptic people. For example, like, you know, I mean, I'm not going to out family members, but it's just what he's describing about the views of Christians in the region is like absurdly false. You know, it's just not true, right? So.
Well, thanks for sharing your
Go- you can talk.
perspective. Yeah, you. No, we're gonna give it over to Altoids and then Anon. Hyrax, maybe next time. We've just got a lot of speaking time today. We have people waiting.
Hello.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah, wait, real quick, Altoids.
So-
Hyrax, you're asking if you could reply. We could set up another time. Maybe we set up a conversation here just between you and Matthew, a one-on-one. I actually think that would be very interesting. Matthew, would you be down for that?
I would. I just want to have like moderation and some level of fact checking, because I have to say I was frustrated when he made a very strong statement, which I'm certain is false, by the way. And like I was kind of being a little debate bro, that like, oh, the vast majority of Christian leaders and explicitly condemned stuff in October in Lebanon. And then he just changes the subject.
Sure.
So, like,
we could have it facilitated and have like organized speaking times. There'll be no interruptions, and we could do fact checking. Cool. I'll DM you both.
Maybe in a few weeks.
Okay, I'll DM.
Hello.
Sure, I'll DM.
I'm up for it.
I'll DM you both to get that set up. Awesome. Altoids, what's up, man?
So what's up? So I'm seeing a lot of discussions in the side chat, and I'm listening to Hyrax. And I think there's an issue here, and it's the lack of context on why Hyrax has his opinions. First of all, I think Hyrax I think he's Jewish. I think he said, I don't remember exactly, but I think he's Jewish and he's British, as we all know. And in Britain, there's this growing issue with Muslims in general. And if he's Jewish, then that means the Jews have their own problems with Muslims historically, and in general, especially the people who migrate to Europe, is not exactly the same as people in UAE, like you said earlier, Adar. So I don't think it's fair to say, for instance, that the Muslims that live in the United Kingdom that he interacts with are the same Muslims that live in Dubai, for instance. Or even the ones that live in Morocco. They're not, the Moroccan Muslims that I met from Morocco are not anywhere near the same as the Moroccan Muslims who live in the Netherlands or in the United Kingdom or France, at least for what I've seen in my interactions with these different communities. And we need to understand the context of why Hyrax is so passionate about this, because for a person who doesn't live in the United Kingdom and doesn't live anywhere near a big Muslim community like I am, I don't have any, I can understand why he's so hateful, right, personally. But I see that since he's the one living in that situation in the United Kingdom, maybe for him, he sees it much more different than me. Or if like you have Justin here, or you have any person from Judea and Samaria. I know many settlers, right? People who you consider a settler. I would just call them Jewish citizens of Judea and Samaria. But do you have these people that might be, some of them might be very aggressive, right? I have personally never been in any of these conflict, in these face-to-face conflicts areas in Judea and Samaria. So I cannot tell you how passionate a person who suffers this conflict can be in Judea and Samaria. I can only talk about my experiences, and my experiences are really nice on both sides, and both Palestinians and Jews from Judea and Samaria. So I cannot tell you, I cannot be passionate about it. I can condemn one group or the other, but I will understand a Palestinian who is completely opposite to Jewish settlers, or settlers who are in opposition to, or Israel who are in opposition to Palestinians. That I can see why they have that. And you remember I vouch for Hyrax to still be allowed to speak, even though I don't agree with his approach or his opinions, because I believe that even opinions like his, which are obviously very passionate, can be understood in head on.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the side chat are like, oh, why? Like MB just said, why do you allow Muslim bashing? Okay, well, we're allowing this guy here,
So,
and there's other people who are critical of Islam, but there's been for many times people who are very critical of Judaism or Israel, or the West, America. There's all type of people here. It's not a Muslim bashing. Of course, if you are Muslim and a person like Hyrax is just dedicating his entire time on air to debate Muslims, then I guess, like, of course, you're going to see this a lot.
right. So, Altoids, I actually agree with most of what you said, with some small distinctions, but I think it is important to understand what leads somebody to be hateful, for sure. That's why, I always say on stream, we shouldn't be surprised that Palestinians are anti-Semitic and Israelis are Islamophobic. It makes sense. So I think it is important to understand how people come to hate others, because we're not born that way. So I fully agree with you there. And I also will say that Head On is a place for all voices, but it's also a place where you can choose to associate who to associate with. And understandably, many Muslims in our community don't want to need to be exposed to just blatant Islamophobia, the same way many of our Jewish communities don't want to be exposed to blatant anti-Semitism. So that's why we created these sub-communities, the circles, in order to allow spaces for all types of people without different energies interacting, without people interacting if they don't want to interact. So that's how we kind of get the best of all worlds. When it comes to doing a session now that is being hosted for everybody, that's being streamed on YouTube, here I have a little bit of a responsibility. What's that? What was that?
No, continue.
Okay,
Didn't say
yeah.
anything.
When it comes to a stream and to something that is being presented to the entire community, as the person hosting this, I do have a bit of an obligation that it's quality content, and I do want to limit the amount of airtime I'm giving just demonizing rhetoric. It doesn't matter who it's towards, right? So we'll continue to have Hyrax on, but I also want to I want to be considerate to the Muslims in the community so that they're not constantly in spaces that are triggering to them. The same way, if we had an anti-Semite that constantly wanted to come out and spew anti-Semitism, I would limit how much airtime they would get. That said, there certainly should be a circle here on Discord and conversations. Call it an Islamophobic support group. People who want to, in good faith, express their
conspiracy circle.
I have no interest in telling people what they can talk about and how. I want full freedom. But in terms of, what is being exposed to everybody, people should be able to consent to certain conversations that they want or don't want to be involved in. And because this is also being streamed to eventually thousands of people, I have somewhat of an obligation to ensure a certain quality of content, if that makes sense.
Yes. Now that History Speaks is here, if you don't mind, I say something real quick. History Speaks, I wanted to discuss with you about Jewish history sometime in the past. I wasn't able to. If you want to talk about it at some point, I will be happy to have that conversation. Just putting this out here.
Let's definitely do that. I will admit that part of first of all, I'm certainly not an expert in antiquity or the ancient Jewish polities and so on. I do have a normative position that the Zionist claim to indigeneity, also an empirical position, is relatively unique. In fact, is entirely unique, I think, where it's based on a religious narrative and then also ancient ancestry to these ancient polities, and then thousands of years later, one can claim to be indigenous to the land and go back. Like there hasn't been any claim analogous to this ever made, and that's why I'm suspicious of it. And the other thing is it doesn't really match with how ethnicity develops in the modern era. So like Palestinians are ridiculed for, oh, your identity, you only started to identify as Palestinians in the 1920s. And like from my perspective, it's like, okay, that's like a generation after Germans started identifying as German or Italians started identifying as Italian. Like this actually makes sense with modernity, with the rise of like a quasi-state in terms of mandatory Palestine. Whereas the Jewish claim seems like eccentric and, you know, kind of mythical. Even though, again, I'm not denying these ancient polities existed or that Jews have some descent from them, but that's basically my position. And then there's a normative angle where I think, how the fuck the Palestinians are expected to accept this claim? It's absurd. You have these illiterate. It seems like our discourse is structured on the idea that these illiterate tenant farmers, just most Palestinians when the Zionists come, are supposed to accept the idea that because they were there thousands of years ago, you know, they probably weren't even familiar, these folks, with Jewish theology at any level. But because this narrative that the Jews had that they can transform the society into a Jewish state, it seems to me like completely absurd that they should have seen this as anything other than colonialism. Yet there's that expectation. It's treated differently in how it's characterized from, you know, the French settling Algeria or Indochina. Even though from the Palestinian perspective, at the very least, I don't see how there could be any difference, right?
I understand, and I actually did a presentation on some of your points that you have. It seems that you have some questions about. I don't know what Hedon did with the presentation. I think they took a video of it. I don't know what happened. But some of the points like migration patterns, populations in the land, where the Jews were, what the Jews say in the medieval ages, in the early antiquity, in the late antiquity. I put some of this information there. I don't know if the presentation is still somewhere. That will be great to be available for me to share with the people, because sometimes I get bored of saying the same things. But I think your point is one that's very important, because even within the Jewish world, especially the non-religious one in the Zionist world, let's call it the Hasbara world, okay? Since this term, people love using this term. Many people don't know Jewish history for real. They only know Jewish history beginning in the Zionist movement in 1892. They talk about Jewish history as if Jewish history starts when Theodor Herzl and all the Zionist people created the idea of creating the state of Israel. But that's not where Jewish history is, and not where it starts, not where it ends. And especially is when I think this big issue is that people don't understand, or they don't want to understand, they don't see or they don't know that Jews as a ethnic group, anywhere they were educated, and they were told the stories, especially the majority, I don't know everybody, but the majority of the population, of the Jewish population, was educated, and they were very well informed of their history, of their lineages, family members, etc. And many of them have this information written and orally. And that's part of the why, for a person who is not Jewish and whose family had lived in the same land for a long time, they see it as, oh, well, this sounds mythical. How is it that a group of people who are so separate from so many places be able to think of this place as their origin place? But I mean, if you know how Jews made money back in the day, you'll see that Jews, no matter where they were, let's say you're a Jew from Paris.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you for a second. I just have a quick question for you. It's something I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. And maybe you can, because I'm sure you know more about Jewish history than I do. But I understand that the narrative was certainly, and you know, you like next year in Jerusalem is used for hundreds of years in the past among the Jews in Europe, for example. I understand the narrative was one of connection and coming from the land, but was it like really ethnical, or was it more in terms of like the pre-Enlightenment Jewry? Was it more God religious? It's like God gave us the land, and the Bible represents our history. The Hebrew Bible represents our history, or was it more like in secular ethnical terms of the sort that a Zionist would use today?
Okay. Your question is very, very interesting, actually, because when you said the Bible and that part of our history, sometimes people see the Bible and they especially here in the West, or people who are educated in Western educational systems, they see it through the Christian lens. For Christians, the Bible, the entire Bible, well, the Christian Bible is the Tanakh, which is the Nevi'im, Ketuvim, and the Torah. The entire Jewish books, we'll call it, we see it as our history. For us, this is what happened to us. This is our ancestors. This is our people. This is what we see. Like the Tanakh, and overall, not even taught that much in Jewish schools because it's considered to be not that important in the religion. Like we study the Torah itself because the Torah we believe is the center of our religion, but the rest of the Tanakh we don't really study it that much because we just consider it to be mostly history or poems or stuff of the sort. For Christians, however, this is all mythical. This is all a story of somebody else. Like this is God chose the Israelites and he gave them the land and therefore the Israelites were the chosen people or something like that. Whatever the Christians call the chosen people, there's like a Christian name. Like I have a friend who always tells this joke. If you go to the Midwest in the United States and they never seen a Jew before, they think you are a mythical creature, that you are like a person from the Bible, and they think, where's the horns? What do you mean? Are you coming from the land of Israel? And because they don't see you they don't see this as their history, because it's not their history for many people, in vast majority of cases. For them, it's religion only, but for us, it's not. So that question is actually very important to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a question I should read about more and challenge my views on. Where I'm very emphatic and where I think the anger you see is rooted is because, again, like where I come from is a lot of knowledge about how ethnicity is constructed in the modern world, but frail and halting knowledge of Jewish history and antiquity, even in the Middle Ages, like how Jewish narratives of identity were constructed. But where I really am emphatic is ethnicity as constructed in the modern sense, and then even more so, how the fuck were the Palestinians supposed to see this as anything other than colonialism, like from their perspective? Because of these ancient narratives, people coming who look different, who spoke different languages, coming and wanting to change the land to a Jewish state, you're basically changing the society, and there's always the fear of displacement, which proved correct. That of course they'd see that as a colonial imposition. I mean, everyone would in that position. How are again, these are mostly illiterate tenant farmers. How are they just see their future changing, they see themselves being displaced. How are they supposed to have like, oh, but Jews have this ancient narrative actually, so it's okay. It isn't reasonable, you know?
Something that I have to say about that is, and I remember debating this to one professor of mine. He's quite popular, famous, so I'm not going to use his name, but he's like an old school Orientalist, and he's actually British, which is funny. With his accent, the way he has like this aristocratic British accent. But he always tells me the Zionist movement is this Ashkenazi dominated movement. You Moroccans, you didn't have any say in the movement. You were invited at the end because they didn't have enough Ashkenazi Jews in Europe anymore, so they had to bring the Sephardic Jews. And I'm like always thinking this is not true at all, because when the Zionist movement was established, yes, it was majority Ashkenazi, the secular world, when they created the Zionist movement. But before the Zionist movement was established as an organization, the World Zionist Organization, there were many Sephardic rabbis in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, that were saying in 1839, what's his name? I forgot his name, but the chief rabbi of Sarajevo, he said the Jews should return to the land already. And moving forward, in 1921, the later chief rabbi of Israel, Rishon LeZion, he's Sephardic. He's born in Jerusalem. His family is a Jerusalem-born family, and he's the rabbi of Jaffa at the time in 1921. As you know, this is the year where the Jaffa riots happened because the Jews coming from Jaffa. It was the ethnic tensions were growing. The rabbi Uziel Ben Sion, if I'm not mistaken, his name was. He went to the community, to the leaders of the Arab Jaffa community, and asked them, We need to stop the violence because we are neighbors. You know me, I know you, we've known for a long time. These are my people as well that are coming here, and they're my family as well. You shouldn't treat them differently from us. And the riots were stopped because of the intervention of Rabbi Uziel Ben Zion. Now this is a very important point because many people say, well, there were Palestinian Jews before the Zionist movement. But of course, what does that mean? Palestinian because they were part of they live in the geographical area that Europeans call Palestine, that has been called Philistine for some time already. Or are they Jewish, who consider themselves Jewish, who consider themselves to be entirely from the land of Jerusalem, that they call themselves Yerushalmi? And will they consider the Jews from Europe or the Jews from Ethiopia, the Jews from Morocco or Iraq, the members of their same group, which they did. And they intervened to the locals to recognize them as such. Like in the case of Hebron, a couple of years later, it was the same situation. The Sephardic community.
But there was if you read Tom Segev, there was much more controversy before the Nazi Holocaust. So I'd be sympathetic to what this old British fellow, solar orientalist, said, that it wasn't necessarily intended to exclude Zionists from other countries, but it was the Jews from other countries, meaning the Mizrahim and the Sephardic Jews. But it was a self-consciously European movement. And other Jews, there were some Yemeni Jews who came, I think, in the first and second Aliyah, right? So they became citizens. So it wasn't explicitly excluded Jews, but it was for European Jews. And then, of course, as you know better than I would, the early generations of Mizrahim, I believe they're very well integrated now, but the early generations did encounter pretty extreme racism and aggressive assimilation efforts. So they were being molded into a culture that the Ashkenazim had set. In terms of this whole debate, like, again, I'm not getting my because you guys have candor. I'm not getting my views on some deeply sophisticated expert understanding of Jewish history. I'm getting my views from having read a lot of books about how ethnicities form, like Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities, like Eric Hobsbawm's Nations and Nationalism. And I really see, what I see is anachronism, because my understanding of ethnicity as it exists today is that it's shaped by nationalism, by the modern secular state, and by all these notions that wouldn't apply to ancient Jewish identities. So just industrialization is important, state formation is important. In fact, it makes sense that the Palestinian identity doesn't become normative until the British Mandate is found, even though there are definitely antecedents before then. Like people were identifying with Jerusalem or Jaffa or whatever, and they identify as Palestinian. Once this kind of quasi-state identity comes, and some percentage of the population are getting identification documents, and then the Jews are coming. So that makes more sense to me as a process of ethnicity than, we've had this for thousands of years, if that makes sense. It seems to me more likely that the Zionist, the identity of Jew, which of course is an ancient identity, becomes secularized in the context of modern Europe, in the context of the Enlightenment, of the age of nationalism, and then also in the context of forming the state of Israel, right?
So,
Maxim says something interesting about the European nationality is based on the concept of the nationhood of the Israelites. And I actually was about to say before he said that, I consider the Israelites to be the first nation to be defined itself as such back in ancient times, separately from other nations. Because if you see how they acted when the Romans occupied and how the society was and how it stayed together, it sounds much more like a nation state situation than any other, or many more of the ancient societies. Also, Judaism, being Jewish, is also part of a tribal identity that people tend to forget. That even to this day, we have a very tribal identity. People they bash Arabs or Muslims and people in general, like, oh, well, you're a tribalistic society. Well, we are not. You're a tribalistic society too. So And on one of your earlier points, you said, one of the 2 points you said one point, number one, Mizrahi Jews were mistreated when Israel was created. That's 100% true. And I 100% agree with this. But it's not a question of Ashkenazi versus Sephardic here. This is what people get wrong. The question of secular versus religious. All the Mizrahi and Sephardic, I don't even use the term Mizrahi because the term Mizrahi was created by Israel Zionist movement. I would just say Sephardic. The Sephardic people was mostly 99% religious and very traditional, very conservative people. When they got to Israel, the Ashkenazi establishment was mostly communist, very less left-wing, very secularist, very atheist. They didn't like any of these things that came from these countries. So they pushed.
But there was definitely, I have to disagree here. There was definitely racism too. I'm sure the religious aspect played a role, but a minority of the Yishuv was religious, and the level of discrimination the Mizrahim faced was distinctive, nevertheless, and intense.
Yeah. So
yes, there was racism.
Altoids, take 30 seconds to wrap it up because I do want to give it to Levy real quick and Anan, and we're going to end the stream in a few minutes. So I do want to give them some airtime, and then we'll bring it up.
We can talk about this another time. We can do this. We'll have. I like Adar Lai come on this show, so let's do like a whole episode related to this, and I'll brush up on my understanding of of these ancient Jewish polities a bit, and present my case a little more succinctly. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk about this again.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Matthew. And yeah, Altoids, you could finish your sentence. I just wanted to let you know that we're going to move it on.
Okay, so just quickly, I agree that the Israeli Sephardi people was mistreated. It's not entirely true that it was only catered for the Ashkenazi, because the Sephardic people were very participant, especially the rich Sephardic families, like the Keduri and the Sassoon families. They were participants supporting Jews to migrate into the land. Not exactly supporting the Zionist movement, but not the same. And your point about secular racism, there was racism. That's 100% true. But I don't think that was the main reason why they were so mistreated.
Awesome. Thank you, Altoids. And yeah, let's definitely set up another session. Anan, I didn't even notice you were here because your profile picture blends very well with the background, but the floor is yours. What's up, man?
Yeah, what's up? So basically, I just want to introduce myself briefly. Like, I'm the guy from your chat that keeps talking about like Islam, like the Israeli G.
Oh, you're the Israeli G.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add some stuff. Like, I'm a right-wing Israeli, and I'm from Jerusalem. And basically, the reason why I'm introducing myself is just because I like to get grilled, so I can, I guess, better my opinions, if I get grilled.
Sure.
So I don't mind that. But so I wrote like a few things that I had a problem with. I had a problem with like your whole like conversation with what's his name, like
Hyrax.
Hyrax, yeah.
So by the way, you know what a Hyrax is?
I have no idea.
Shafan Sela.
Oh, okay. I'll never remember this name.
It doesn't add up to that's what it is. Yeah.
It sounds like a mythical creature, and it's just
they're cute. They're all over the north, running around everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, my problem in the conversation with him was that it sort of like talked about like percentages in like a really, in my opinion, like a stupid way. Like it almost just ignored what like propaganda, like it almost ignored like the real elements on the ground of propaganda and how it affects people, like talking about the Christians and like 20%, 30%, whatever. It kind of doesn't really add up, because propaganda, it can come from Islam, but at the same time, the propaganda spreads to everyone around it, right? And I wanted to also like, I'll make it really brief, but I'm connecting it to what you just said about like why Mizrahi Jews like didn't come to Israel super quick. I would also say that Islamic like propaganda, you could say, or like Islamic I don't know how to, this like I guess you could call it Islamic propaganda was above their heads the whole time. So like the Islam was always very anti-Zionist almost by definition, and it's obvious why these people had a harder time to connect with modern. Oh,
Sorry,
I
that's
can
my
hear myself.
fault. That's my fault.
Yeah, my
sorry.
bad. So it's obvious why they had a harder time to connect with modern day Judaism than, let's say, people from Europe who are literally like, let's say, forced into the situation where they have to flee and nobody accepts them, right? Like it was like many countries during and after World War II that didn't accept them. It was a lot easier basically for them. And also I'm tackling right like the Islamic element, but obviously like I don't think we have a lot of time to go too deep into that. So I just kind of wanted to make like an introduction, and like I'm always happy to be grilled. To be honest, I'm not very. I don't have a lot of free time, but when I do, I'm happy.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you joined our community here, and it's it's good to have a wide diversity of opinions. So I'm looking forward to engaging more with you. I don't have all too much to comment. I don't have all too much to comment on what you just said.
Yeah, I didn't go too in depth.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
There's
But
not
we
much to
could.
comment on,
But
right?
next time I go live, maybe you want to join for longer, and we could do like a full grill session.
Right.
A full,
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, I'm down.
a full ala ish we could do.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could do it with like multiple Palestinians and stuff. Like I think I've already done it like another day, but I mostly come later on. So like, what time is this going
so
on?
I'll tell you what
normally?
I'll tell you what the plan is. Next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Jerusalem time, we're gonna do a panel of Israelis, just Israelis. So you should join for that.
Oh, that's boring. Oh, they're gonna grill me. Actually, it's kind of
Wait, no,
interesting,
because there's gonna be some there's gonna be anti-Zionist Israelis, some Meretz, centrists. It'll be a nice mix.
Right. Yeah, you're right. You've got a lot of that. So
yeah, there's a good mix here, so you should definitely join for that one. And I'm gonna stream probably 2 more times this week, so there'll be opportunities.
Is that like earlier on, like 8 o'clock?
I normally start them at around 7
time.
or 8. Yeah.
7 or 8. All right.
Yeah.
That's gonna be hard for me to get early, but I'll try.
But that's fine. You can, as you see, it's almost 11 and we're still going. Although I do need to start winding down. Honestly, this shit affects my sleep schedule. We get too caught up in these long conversations.
Yeah, it's gonna affect mine as well. I just had it like all set up, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's gonna go downhill.
Well, the things we do to leave an impact. It's a sacrifice we take.
I agree.
Anyways, so what should your name's Anan?
I keep my name like.
Okay, your pseudonym is. Okay, Anan.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's just say Anan, and also some people here know exactly where I live by accident, but I'm not gonna go more deep into that. But I'm from Jerusalem, so I mean it's good enough.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you joined, and I'm looking forward to talking more. We're gonna now give it over to Levi, but afterwards we're just gonna move it over to the chill room, and we could keep the conversation going. So the stream will end in 5 minutes, but we'll probably be going for a few more hours in the chill room, or maybe we open 2 rooms. You have chill room and bring the popcorn. This might be a bring the popcorn kind of moment, but we'll see. Levi, what's up? You're gonna close this out. Levi, you're muted. Oh, and Alex, thank you so much for the $2 Canadian super chat. Much appreciated. Thank you. If anybody wants to finish it off with the super chat, that'll be the final question we address on stream. Levi, you're unmuted now. What's up, man? I'm not hearing you. I think you might need to leave and come back. I think, did we have this problem last time with Levi? I think we did.
I had that problem like not so long ago. And yeah. I was like getting grilled, I guess. Not really, and it happened to me. It just stopped working, and then I had to reinstall Discord completely.
Really? Okay. Yeah, there's sometimes technical stuff.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Levi, what's up, man?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, thank you both. So it's an honor to finish this distinguished panel with, and so there were certain elements I wanted to address, both about Matthew, about what Matthew was saying, and hierarchs. So I don't see any of them in the chat, in the audience.
Yeah, Hyrex is,
So,
Hyrex is here.
so- Yeah. So about the about the incident in Nablus, where they beheaded the gay Palestinian. There was also famously 10 years ago where Orthodox Jew stabbed a gay 15-year-old also to death. I don't want to compare, but I'm saying like the phobia for gays exists in both societies. Obviously, I think in a conservative Muslim society, they're much more likely to also apply it in a theocratic way, like to outlaw it. Whereas religious Jews aren't. They don't like it in public, but they won't really. They don't want to be in charge of implementing that in law, because they would see it as self-defeating. Yes, and about the discrimination against Jews from Arab lands or from North African lands. There are a lot of very good papers about from Ella Shohat, where she does highlight, like from Ben Gurion and many other high-ranking officials, where they said some pretty racist stuff about Mizrahi or Sephardic Jews. There was also the element that they were much more traditional as opposed to the secular European Jews. And then there was another thing I wanted to address of Matthew, that he's right that the ethnic iteration of returning to the land is something that was emphasized by Zionism. But even before this secular ethnic identity of Judaism, there was a certain affinity between Jewish communities, even if they didn't understand each other, even if they have very different cultures. They did see each other as one people. And you see that throughout correspondence between leaders of communities from medieval Spain to Iraq, and later between Jews from Poland and Jews in Morocco. So to say that it was simply a spiritual thing that God will return us, it wasn't just that. They did feel as one people, as a people that cares for each other and takes care for each other. Obviously, from the Palestinian perspective, they don't see it that way. But that goes without saying.
Awesome.
But Matthew isn't here, so.
Yeah, but that was insightful. Thank you for sharing. It's funny, Hyrex says that you sound like a sheltered Tel Aviv leftist. If only he knew.
Oh, interesting.
If only he knew, huh? That's hilarious.
I don't know why, but he thought I was Palestinian. So.
Right, that's true. He thought Anan was Palestinian. He thought I'm a diehard one-stater. It's all good. All right, guys.
What do you think I am? What do you think I am, Harris? Tell me. I'm curious.
Yeah, what's Altoids? Oh, he's not here, but he could type.
He's a settler, but he only built settlements in like Ashdod or something, right?
Those are my favorite type, the Israel proper settlers. So, okay.
Well, some might say Damascus is Israel proper.
Yeah, it depends who you ask, right? That's true. Okay, so I was going to respond to one more question, and then we're going to bring it over to the chill room, or the voice channels, wherever you guys decide to go. But somebody asked, it was in regards to Hyrex called me progressive, and then somebody asked why I don't identify as progressive. So first of all, I don't know if any of those labels are just fitting. I think that progressives generally are heavily associated with what is known as woke politics, which is very heavily focused on different justice movements, but they do it in a way that they create a hierarchy within society, and they view it's almost like there's some background noise. Levy, I think that's on Levy, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, I'll mute myself.
Yeah, cool. So what's known as woke politics is, and I know that's a vague term, but I think people know what I'm talking about. Kind of like the obsession with fixing society by
Did you see
looking.
South Park?
What's that?
Woke is dead. Did you see last week's South Park?
No, I didn't.
It was the bomb.
Oh, is it about
Oh.
wokeness?
It's like woke is dead. Carter was wearing a shirt that woke is dead, and he was crying that NPR was canceled, and you can't listen to all the Jews and lesbians complaining about stuff.
I should check that out. That's funny. So it does seem like it's dying, and I think it's good. But there's this movement that's big in the West, and I think primarily in the United States, and it likes to divide society based on certain identities that they decide are oppressed. Right? It's an alliance between Black Americans, the LGBTQ community, and I guess also women's rights. And all these groups have legitimate grievances and things they should fight for. But the way this movement was created was very much centered around victimhood. We are victims, we are oppressed, and the white man is the oppressor. It's an ideology that inherently creates societal division and perpetuates self-victimhood. Two horrible things for society. Horrible, that I want to just steer clear from. So I know that's not what progressive means, but often progressive is associated with that. I consider myself more of just like a classical liberal. I'm a social libertarian. People should be free to do whatever they want. Don't infringe on people's rights to really be free when it comes to, whether it's drug policy or who we marry or who we love. I don't think government should be involved in any of that. When it comes to economic policy, I mean, I do think societies that have a social safety net are better for society. I think it's good to provide for those who are just struggling to provide for themselves for the multitude of reasons that people might struggle to provide. So it's good a society that has a social safety net. But I'm also very skeptical of big government. Big government is wasteful. Authority often shouldn't be trusted blindly. So having government be massive and giving them our money where they could waste it, I think is problematic. So I do support a safety net, but I think we need to be very careful with giving government unmitigated power and constantly keep them in check and constantly working to make it more efficient. And then when it comes to, I generally prefer the path of nonviolence. I think it should always be the first approach, but perhaps not the only approach. So what box do you want to put me on? I think it may be just classical liberal. I don't know. I've never been sure how to identify. I generally don't vote for either of the political parties just because they're both garbage. But if I lived in a swing state or was registered to vote in a swing state, maybe I'd think differently. And yeah, that's a little bit about my views. Cool. So honestly, I think one could even interpret that as progressive, but it's certainly not woke. And with that, thank you for joining. We are going to do another stream tomorrow. I'm interviewing Sapir Hendelman. Sapir Hendelman founded the organization called Minds of Peace. It actually is part of what inspired me to do these live streams. It's these public negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. The idea is to build a solution to the conflict from the ground up, involving the people. So we're going to have him on. We'll also turn that into a Q&A. And if anybody wants to continue the conversation, I imagine this will go on for another few hours as it normally does. So if you want to, I'm going to drop a link in chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's in my description. It's in the description. If you're watching this on Twitter, it's in my bio. Once you join, you'll see people in either the chill room or bring the popcorn. Just click and you're connected. You don't need to show your face. You don't need to speak. You can just listen in. But that's where the after party is going to be. And with that, we're signing off. So to those here, we have two rooms now. I get the sense, when I see who's here, I get the sense that bring the popcorn is where you might want to go. Like Hyrax, the chill room is not, it's not for you, right? You're a bring the popcorn kind of guy. So I would just hop in there. And then whoever would want to continue a conversation that's just non-confrontational, more chill, doesn't even need to be political. It could be cultural, whatever, just super chill vibes. Wait, where'd Hyrax go? I hope he didn't take offense. I meant that in all seriousness and not in all good. Anyways, if somebody doesn't want to be in any high, although now that he's gone, I feel like we could all go in the chill room. I'm trying to think of the dynamic. Whatever, it's not for me to say.
I'm not really chill. I just wasn't pushed to my limits. So
That's true.
Anan,
you're sticking around.
Yeah, I don't want to stick for too long. But
Okay,
yeah,
fine.
maybe
Go.
half an hour.
Okay, bring the popcorn. It is no, but bring the popcorn is where things could get heated, controversial. You could share any views, still keep it respectful, but there the temperature level is higher. Chill room, it's chill. It's cool.
To be honest, actually, like with Palestinians, I'm a lot more chill, and with like Israeli leftists, it gets a lot more heated, like normally. But I don't know.
We could try
I don't really control the weather. You know what I mean. I try to do my best to stay in the same temperature as everybody else.
Okay, fair. So wherever you guys take it, I'm sure it'll be good. And with that, we're gonna those watching the stream.